It's time to talk about the year of 2025 in video games. I've now had my PlayStation 5 for a little over a year since I picked it up for Astrobot last year, and this year it certainly got some new offerings. But Nintendo also released their newest console, the Nintendo Switch 2. Along with that console came a variety of games that would showcase some of the system's capabilities. We've also been seeing a trend in the indie space, where more studios are being formed by former employees of bigger companies. These developers are making passion projects that have left a lasting mark on the industry. And so, with all that said, I played well over 33 games this year, and I'm going to tell you about my favorite 33. As we go through the ranking, I'm also going to be giving each game a bronze, silver, or gold medal in a variety of categories. More on those shortly. This is all just my opinion, of course, and you are free to voice yours respectfully in the comments. And if you just happen to like the way I'm doing things here, then leaving a like helps a lot as well, and you can subscribe for future discussions about games like this. In the meantime, let's get one thing out of the way, and that is the top 3 games I did not play in 2025 that you would expect to see on a list like this, but unfortunately will not be a part of mine. At number 3, Hollow Knight Silksong. I know that there was a lot of acclaim for the game when it came out, a lot of hype leading up to its release after many years of Team Cherry working hard on the thing, but frankly, Hollow Knight, the first one, I love its atmosphere. I really understand why people enjoy the game. It's just that it's way too difficult for me. I tried getting back into the game around the time Silksong came out, and as soon as a jellyfish exploded in my face and cost me over 1,000 money units, I was like, no, this just isn't for me anymore. I can't handle this. So, to all the people who enjoyed the game, I'm happy for you, and I really do think it came out to be a good game, just really not for me by definition. At number 2, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is a game that I would like to get to at some point as a good re-release of the original Final Fantasy Tactics. It's even got the original version of the game on there, which is a welcome option for preservation. But Triangle Strategy was one of my game of the years back in the day, and based on the fact that I enjoyed that one so much, I expect that I would like the game that it's pretty much based off. And at number 1 on the games I did not play, it's Peak. And quite simply put, the game is Peak. But in reality, I just didn't really have anyone to play it with. But it looks great. Aggro Crab has good people. So, shout out to those 3 games. Silksong, Peak, and Final Fantasy Tactics will not be appearing in this ranking, but they're flowers anyway. And now a quick few mentions to games that I did not like. These are the top 3 disappointments of 2025. One of them is Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. It's kind of a lackluster remastering of the game, and honestly the controls felt a little off. It's great that the button control scheme is now playable on a big screen in what is technically speaking HD resolution, but it's not much. Like, I can't recommend the thing at full price, personally speaking, unless you never ever played the game before and really want to see how the retro Donkey Kong duology got its start. And then we have Super Mario Party plus Jamboree TV for the Nintendo Switch 2. The fact that all the Nintendo Switch 2 stuff, including the higher resolution boards, were in a completely separate option on the main menu, it completely throws off the flow of getting into the game. And the fact that you can't just play the regular Mario Party mode with the resolutions, that was a big red flag right there. I believe that since the time of release, they've actually patched it to where now you can play the regular board modes with the 4K resolution and the cameras and all that. But even then, the Bowser Live Edition in particular is really small. Like, for the price they're charging, especially getting 3 mini games that use the mic. 3. You play through the same 3. You actually only play 2 of the 3 each time, and it's random. But the fact that there's only 3 should tell you that it wasn't a very good idea. Mouse mini games, I will get behind those to some degree. There is at least a better selection there, and some of them are quite fun. But as a whole package, I can't say that Jamboree TV felt like earning that moniker of Nintendo Switch 2 edition. And the last disappointment I've got for you is a little game called Ruffy and the Riverside. I was intrigued by this title because of its mechanic of being able to swap textures in the world. Like, hey, see that waterfall? You could change the water into grass, and you can climb on the grass so that you can effectively climb the waterfall. The problem is that's like the only puzzle in the game. And that's a slight exaggeration. I'm being hyperbolic. I know. There's a few other puzzles that use it, I guess. But it felt like I was doing a lot of the same swapping over and over again. So as much as I wanted to like this game and I thought its mechanic had some unique potential, especially the fact that they also let you customize the textures yourself. There's a built-in editor. You can unlock stuff for it. And so at one point, I completely changed the water texture to my own version of the water texture. It could be a fun little romp if you are really, really into video game texture work. But because I don't think it uses its mechanic to its fullest potential, I had to call it a disappointment, so it missed the top 33 ranking. Now, before we get to the honorable mentions and the list proper, let's go over the categories that will be awarded during this video. Welcome to PowerPoint Land. If you didn't watch my video back in 2024, you might not know about a bunch of these categories that I created in an effort to transcend the genre-based categories of the Game Awards. So, if you need a little overview of how these categories are going to play out, stick around for this section, but if you're already familiar with what I've done before, you can skip this section using the video chapter selection. And for those treating this video as more of a listening experience, I will be reading out what you see on the slides here. So one category is the best box art. This is for cover images that convey elements of the game and captivate the players on sight. Then we go to best art direction, which is for splendorous visuals made possible by a combination of style choices and mastery over graphics technology. Best character design is for visually appealing player characters and NPCs with a sense of personality. Best environment design is about the level geometry, backgrounds, and such, which create an immersive world for the player to enjoy. Best animation is for making characters, creatures, and objects move in ways that are a sight to behold. Best combat is for creating fun and interesting ways to contend with enemies. Best traversal is for providing smooth and visceral means of navigating the in-game environment. Separate from that is best exploration, where best traversal is about getting from point A to point B. Exploration is about seeking out optional pathways and motivating players to search the in-game environment thoroughly, giving them a sense of fulfillment for doing so. Best puzzle design is for creating thought-provoking challenges for the player to overcome and giving them just enough guidance to find solutions on their own. Best progression is for satisfyingly rewarding player progress and motivating them to continuously engage in the core gameplay loop. Best user experience is a combination of user interface design and the ease by which a player can interact with the interface. We will be making mention of notable accessibility options. However, it's worth noting that I am not an accessibility consultant, nor am I someone who frequently utilizes accessibility options in games, so I am not an expert in this field and take my opinions with a grain of salt. However, I still want to bring attention as it's an important aspect of gaming to make it accessible for everyone. So we'll be looking at games that provide options that allow players of different abilities to meaningfully engage with the game. The best soundtrack is certainly a matter of taste, but it will be what I find to be the most robust and auditorily pleasing selection of music as a whole. Best sound design, then, is for all the sounds that are not music. Audio effects that enhance immersion and offer good feedback to the player. Rather than do an individual performance award, I will be awarding Best Voice Cast for an ensemble as a whole. This is for consistently strong acting performances from all the cast members. Best Narrative is for a combination of engaging plot points and thematic cohesion. But separate from the narrative as a whole, you might have Best Dialogue. This is for character moments that take place between the plot points, thought-provoking, witty, or otherwise enjoyable conversations. And finally, there will be a couple of awards that give mentions to games that came out prior to 2025, but received notable updates. First is Best Content Update. This can be a free patch or a paid DLC expansion, but either way, it adds something to the game that gives players a good reason to return. And finally, we have the Best Re-Release. It doesn't matter if it's a remaster, a remake, or a reimagining, but this new version of a game gives it the best chance of connecting with new and returning players in the year of 2025. At the very end of the video, I'm going to be showing all these categories with their top 3 winners side by side, so don't worry about losing track as I mention them during the ranking. And now back to the video proper as we begin the honorable mentions followed by the ranking. If you just viewed the categories, welcome back from PowerPoint land, and if you skipped past them using the chapter select, then let's get on to the honorable mentions. These games didn't quite make the list, but I would at least call them good. Shadow Labyrinth was unfortunately a game that did not quite click for me. I was intrigued by it much the same way a lot of other people were with what they were doing with the Pac-Man IP. They really sent him in a new direction. It was darker and edgier, and so that could either be really cool in its own way, or it could be like so bad it's good kind of thing, and either way you just kind of want to see it play out. I would say they actually did a good job of adapting it to this darker tone. And like, you're not really talking to Pac-Man, you're talking to a being that happens to act a lot like Pac-Man and shares some of his abilities. The majority of it is, for lack of a better comparison, kind of like Hollow Knight. Not as good as Hollow Knight, I want to be very clear on that. The little I did play of the first Hollow Knight, I know how polished that game is. But Shadow Labyrinth feels like it falls a bit short in that. This is actually a game I did not manage to finish because one section just got way too difficult for me and I couldn't stick it out. But a big problem is the runbacks to bosses. I think it's a bigger problem in Hollow Knight, and the further you get in Shadow Labyrinth, the more generous they are about putting the save points close to the boss. But especially early game, there was a lot of having to fight back through stuff just to get another try at a boss that was kicking my butt. So yeah, this is a cool exploration of what Pac-Man could be if it wasn't just an arcade game or a 3D platformer like Pac-Man World. But I think you need to be the right kind of person for it to line up with. Combat also felt a little slow and clunky, and it felt like it was taking a very long time to get some basic Metroidvania abilities that you would expect to have very early on. So it just felt slow and plodding for a while. I did my best to stick it out, really, truly. I got a good number of areas in before I finally felt the challenge was too much. But there's a decent atmosphere there, and I highly recommend that if you're gonna play this game, you go in reading all the log entries, seeing the backstory there, because there could be something special lying underneath all this. Everyone's favorite $10 game that should have been a pack-in title is Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. This isn't really much of a game. I could not have justified putting it in the top 33, but it is at least one that I managed to finish. I did the whole thing on stream, actually, and we read all about the inner workings of Nintendo Switch 2. I say all about, but actually it kind of strikes this weird imbalance. Some points it goes super deep into the tech talk to the point that they try and warn you that, like, hey, this might be a little advanced. Don't worry if you don't understand this stuff, which kind of reminiscent of how Labo handled its educational section as well. And that was my main draw coming into this game. If you know my previous content, you know that I love the weird Labo stuff. But at other points, it felt like an explanation would be cut off early and that they would not let the player get deeper into the tech talk on certain elements. So it's weird when they were restrictive on that versus when they just went all out describing everything. And I feel like for this game to really work, you have to pick a lane and either keep it to bare basics or go all out on everything. The mini games in there are what flesh out the game as a game. You've got a lot of mini games that deal with mouse controls especially, and I don't know what it is, but this was not a good impression of mouse controls. Later on this list, we will get to a game that I think has really good mouse controls on Nintendo Switch 2, but the Switch 2 Welcome Tour did not feel like an appropriate showcase for them because they want you to do the finest of motions in a matter of seconds. Maybe for some people that comes a lot more naturally, and I did try messing with the sensitivity settings on the home menu to see if that would help at all, but there were certain challenges I just couldn't fathom how anyone could possibly do them. I was practically hurting my wrist trying to get things to work right. Like there's this electric maze where you have to move the mouse in 3 different directions, and they want you to finish that in 3 seconds. I mean, I would love to see who is actually capable of doing these things with a Joy-Con mouse. People will probably hate on Dragon Drive a little more, but I do think that overall, it's at least a better game than Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. There was some fun that I had with the initial Global Jam demo, trying to get into that dual mouse control scheme, and really feeling like this could be something special. Like it's its own brand of fun, and I bet it still is, but something about it, even though I bought the full version of the game afterwards and played some matches, it just didn't click enough to stick. I can't say I've really been online playing Dragon Drive, and I bet the lobbies are pretty bare right about now, to be honest. Because either people have got that control scheme down and they're going to smoke you, or you're going to be flailing trying to learn it against those people who are smoking you. Because who else are you going to play against but the people who committed and stuck to it? I would really love some more tutorials on some of the advanced movement in the game. There's a few tutorials you can bring up by reading in the menu, but like something a little more akin to how Nintendo Labo does its tutorials. I'm sorry to bring that up again, but you know, really having to go hands-on and trying stuff. Like for some challenges, they expect you to, say, drive on one wheel and lift the other side so that you don't touch certain obstacles. I could never quite seem to get the hang of that particular motion down. And then jumping off the ramp also felt a little finicky, trying to do that bunny hop motion. So I'm sure there's something that I'm just not doing right, because this has been tested to heck and back, and some players have gotten used to it. But once again, I guess this just kind of falls in the category of not for me. At the very least, I do see some potential fun to be had with the game being the fact that you're trying to adapt to this control scheme. There was a new SpongeBob platformer this year, Titans of the Tide. It takes the story in a very different direction from previous SpongeBob games and has the Flying Dutchman and King Neptune in an argument over who is the superior immortal being of Bikini Bottom. You don't really think of King Neptune too much as the villain role, but it works here. And it allows for some interesting set pieces like his palace. The core of this game, though, is swapping back and forth between SpongeBob and Patrick on the fly. In previous games, to swap characters, you had to do it at a dedicated station, or it would be a level where you're forced to play as one character or the other. But here, they give you a button, and that button swaps your character immediately, while the other one becomes your ghost buddy. Then, as the game progresses, you have platforming sections where you are fully expected to perform a move as SpongeBob and then swap midair to Patrick and then perform his special move and then swap back to SpongeBob. So it becomes this real flow. You can tell that the game was built with the speedrunning community in mind. I think Purple Lamp knows that that is the heart of the people who kept Battle for Bikini Bottom alive and then allowed the Cosmic Shake to happen and are now playing Titans of the Tide. It's a game that lacks a little polish in certain places. I did play it on Switch 2 for reference, but that said, it's still mostly competent. I did get locked out of a side quest, though, and I'm a little mad about that. I was supposed to get something for Squilliam. I found the thing that he wanted, but anytime I talked to him, he was just stuck in go-away mode, so I don't know if that's been patched out since or anything like that, or if that's a wide issue or just me. But yeah, unfortunately, I kind of had to keep it off the list due pretty specifically to the fact that it felt like the game was busted in certain places. But it was fun. My final honorable mention did not come out in 2025, but is on this list because it is the bronze medal recipient for Best Content Update. I am talking about Splatoon 3 version 10.0. The game now runs better on Nintendo Switch 2, but the big bulk of this update is that they gave us third weapon kits. There are 30 brand new weapons in the game with different sub and special combinations, and so now there is this whole new life breathed in as people try out these different combinations, possibly rethink their mains, and everyone's just having a good time with it. So I would occasionally hop back onto Splatoon 3 during the year, and the new weapons definitely helped give it that feeling of freshness that Splatoon always strives for. And so, without further ado, all honorable and dishonorable mentions aside, we are finally counting down the top 33 games of 2025. At number 33, Omega 6: The Triangle Stars. This game is on the list because of its affiliation with Takaya Imamura. For those who don't know, he is a retired Nintendo artist who worked on Star Fox and F-Zero, namely the character portraits. This is his new project, and he's got a brand new cast of original characters in this point-and-click adventure game. And you know, I didn't even know I was in for a point-and-click adventure when I heard about this game at the time. I just saw the style and thought, this could be neat. But yeah, if you're in the mood for a relatively simple point-and-click adventure game, there's some decent humor here, and as long as you know your basic point-and-click tropes, like go to every screen and try everything, then you should have minimal trouble getting through, except for one little thing that dropped it down a bunch of places on this list, and that's the combat. See, in some games, there's a rock, paper, scissors element of combat, but it's usually disguised in some way. Like, Pokemon has the fire, water, and grass types with different effectiveness and weaknesses to each other. It's like playing rock, paper, scissors when you're using those types. And then there's other RPGs that are like, oh yeah, rock, paper, scissors, that's just a thing you do. Like Paper Mario Color Splash when they make you do it a bunch of times at the Rochambeau temples. But never did I think that we would just literally be playing rock, paper, scissors, not as a side mode, but as the combat. Each character, and there's two playable captains, by the way. Each of these captains has an array of rock, paper, and scissor cards that comprise a deck. Your enemies also have a deck of rock, paper, and scissors cards. Each turn, you select one, and you hope that you win. I mean, that's about the size of it. Like, if you use a scissors against a paper, you do massive damage to the enemy. But if the enemy uses a rock on your scissors, then it's the other way around. And of course, you could possibly tie and then negate damage from either side. And when you run out of cards, it just shuffles your deck and you keep going. To be fair to the game, there are items. There is a little farming element with a bonsai garden, and you can get different items from there or buy different items in towns that could hypothetically give you an advantage in combat when used appropriately. But despite knowing this and despite using these items, there was just a certain point where it felt like it was impossible to beat my opponent. It felt like the computer was reading my every move and just responding accordingly. So, just be warned, if you do play this game, you are going to have to stick out the combat, and it might just feel like rolling dice repeatedly, because that's effectively what it is. But if you can get past that, you've got a really stylish game on your hands. I award Omega 6: The Triangle Stars the gold medal in character design. At number 32, Monster Hunter Wilds. A few years back, I got into the series to some degree with Monster Hunter Rise on Nintendo Switch. It's a daunting series to get into when you look at menus and stuff, but if you were to team up with people online, especially if someone can voice chat with you to talk more specifics about the game, you've got a very welcoming community on your hands, and in that sense, it can actually be very easy and fun to get into. So I decided that when Wilds was announced, I would continue and see if the series could stick with me long term, even though I never really got all that far into Rise, never tried the DLC expansion for that one. But it was fun enough. And I can say the same thing about Monster Hunter Wilds. It was fun enough, but the series has yet to really sink its claws in me. When other game options came up later in the year, I ended up gravitating towards those instead, even though I didn't really have any major issues with Monster Hunter Wilds. I had plenty of fun playing the game. I had gotten more used to the menus and stuff, and I wasn't losing challenges repeatedly to the point of wanting to stop like in Shadow Labyrinth. Like, sure, I could lose sometimes. There's some challenge to be had in the game, but I would get back up and try again and usually get it quick enough. But I'm still pretty early in the game. I'm not sure I finished chapter 1 when all was said and done. And then later in the year, I did realize, wait a minute, I hadn't played much Monster Hunter Wilds lately, so I made myself pick it up and play it again, and that was a mistake. Because you see, Monster Hunter, when you're still as new to it as I am, is a game that you can't put down for a while and then come back to. If you're still learning about the game, you're really gonna wanna stick it out. Because it felt way more daunting than when I first started the series, just trying to remember how everything worked after being away from it for so long. There is a training area, there are in-game tutorials that you can refresh yourself on. I even went and did some optional side missions that were really low level just to try and get used to the controls again. But ultimately, it just did not click to the point of me wanting to play it for longer and longer. And so this may just end up being another series that's not for me. But let's talk about what Wilds does correctly for a moment. There's probably some debate to be had about how the world is structured, and I won't really get into that because I don't think I'm the right person to judge that element of the game. What I can judge is the way that the weapons feel, and the ones that I tried, there are some really fun moments you can have with weapons in this game. At one point, I went full Rambo on a beast on a mission, and I figured out how to actually mount the thing and do a ton of damage from on top of it. I was like dashing in midair and stuff. I wish I could remember what weapon I was using so that I could give you the best possible description of this, but I was in a flow state for that particular fight. If anything was gonna get this series to click for me, it was that particular fight where everything just clicked. It felt right. I was moving, zipping all around and doing exactly what I needed to do. And this game makes it even more satisfying with the weak point system. Well, I say weak points, but actually they are the wounds that you inflict on a monster. Hit an area enough times and a wound will show up. It's effectively this glowing area of a monster where you can hit it and do extra damage. You can even remove appendages in this way, depending on what kind of monster you're fighting. Maybe you cut its tail off, for example, and get extra bonuses that way. That element is fun. I do want to give due praise for that. However, it wasn't fun enough for me personally to stick with it and really give it any of the main awards. That said, I dug into the accessibility menu, and I really like how Capcom has grouped the accessibility options. It's very organized. You've got your visual ones, your audio ones, anything related to controls, and for each of these there are different presets for the type of thing that you might need to access this game. So with that in mind, I am actually giving Monster Hunter Wilds the gold medal for accessibility options. Good on you, Capcom, for that, and I hope that the Monster Hunter games click better with people in the future. I know that Wilds was kind of hit and miss for a lot of people, not just me. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is probably the best Nintendo Switch 2 upgrade that they have offered so far, and it's all because of the additional content found in the Star-Crossed World expansion. It was very fun to revisit this game and see new, extra pretty locales, because the game did get a resolution bump, and would you look at that, it applied to the main game and the new Star-Crossed World content simultaneously without having this weird option on the menu. You just kind of go to the Star-Crossed World levels on the same world map. That's crazy. Imagine if a game didn't do it like that. Anyway, there are a few new abilities that get introduced in Star-Crossed World for mouthful mode, but the highlight among them is absolutely Gear Mouth, which changes how you navigate levels by allowing you to climb up the walls and perform dashes from one wall to the next. You actually have to click the button a second time right when you're up against the wall to lock your gear back in place so that you don't just fall off completely, and it makes for some pretty tight challenges. I'm also a sucker for slide levels, so Sign Mouth gets a pretty good mention from me as well. All in all, it's not a ton of new levels that you're getting here, but the ones that are there are all very fleshed out, and the final boss is exactly what you would expect from Kirby fare at this point. The soundtrack also has some lovely new additions. And so, all that said, Starcrossed World gets my silver medal for Best Content Update. Unbeatable is a game that I wish I liked more than I did. I really, really wish I did. Seeing the trailers for this game, it gave off immaculate vibes. And hearing that this was going to be a rhythm game with a big narrative focus, those are two things that I greatly love in my games, rhythm and story. And you're telling me I'm going to get both of them with a fun original soundtrack full of punk rock vibes? I mean, it was day one, sign me up kind of deal. And by the end of the game, I enjoyed it well enough, but there are certain issues that are hampering this game that I just could not get over. For reference, I played the PS5 version, in case that makes any difference in how I'm perceiving the game. But for one thing, it felt broken. Like, certain things would not load in properly, or the camera would not be in the right spot for a certain moment of dialogue, or there would be stuttering during the rhythm sections, which is absolutely detrimental when you're playing a rhythm section expecting the thing to just keep running smoothly. So, I don't know, all these little hiccups just kind of left the wrong impression of the game on me, but the big part is the interface. In this game, you are blocking attacks and performing your own attacks to the rhythm, and enemies can appear on the left or right side of you at any given time. But the two lanes that you are watching for which button to press are not left and right. They are top and bottom. So as you're playing this rhythm game, your cues for what button to press are supposed to be that if it's in the top lane, you press the R bumper, and if it's in the bottom lane, you press the L bumper. It sounds like something you could get used to, but then the game has obstacles coming at you from the left and right directions. The camera will pan over to the left side to show you something coming at you from the left. And then right at those moments, all my muscle memory goes away. And I'm like, wait, we moved to the left side. I need to hit the left bumper, even if it's coming from the top lane where I actually need to hit the right bumper. I tried all sorts of tricks to try and get used to this. I held the controller sideways. I stood sideways in relation to my television so that my left would kind of be my bottom. I don't know. It was a whole thing. And I just feel like I shouldn't have had to get used to it, because what other buttons were we using? Why was the interface not designed to use up and down on the D-pad? I'm wondering if the PC version actually uses up and down on the arrow keys, or two keys that are up and down in relation to each other, because the decision on PS5 just makes no sense whatsoever. So between that and the way the game runs, it was a very clunky experience. And yet it's still on this list, because the game has heart. There is clear passion here, especially in the later moments of the story, which do hit home a little closely for me, and that does kind of bump it up a bunch of notches in my eyes. There was a nice payoff. The final song is tremendous if it's running properly. You start to care for these characters, and it's an interesting world that I might like to see explored more if it's in a better game. Unbeatable is not receiving any medals from me, but it is my number 30 game of the year. It feels like not that long ago that I was saying my game of the year was Octopath Traveler 2. The series was already pretty good from the outset, but Octopath Traveler 2 took everything from the first game and refined it to the purest level of polish imaginable. So imagine my surprise when Octopath Traveler 0 was announced. Now, given that the 0 indicates that this game is a prequel to the first game, people picked up on the fact that, wait a minute, the mobile game was a prequel to the first game. Is this a re-release of the mobile game? And in some ways, it definitely is. I don't know how much has been reimagined from the mobile version, since I never really got around to playing that version, but the elements that made the game a mobile game are still clearly present in this version, minus transactions, of course. This is a one-time purchase. But elements like picking up materials as you wander the overworld, it just gives this I need to tap the screen sort of mentality to it, but in the game you just press a button instead. You're rebuilding a town, so there's dragging things around the town space as you rebuild it. Yeah, like, you can see the mobile game design influence on this. However, I'm sure the team went to great lengths to make it more console friendly. What I have played so far, because full disclosure, I have not finished this game, not even close, has been solid. It's not the height of Octopath Traveler. That's the second game, if you want the best that the series has to offer. This one feels a little weird, as at the point I'm at so far, I've really only got the one character that's got the classic jobs from the Octopath series. And that's something about this. The Octopath series was named because you would follow 8 characters. You would pick one to start with, and then there would be 8 separate stories. Octopath Traveler 2 did a much better job of tying those 8 stories together. But even in Octopath Traveler 1, you got these succinct stories from 8 people that just so happen to be separate. But in Octopath Traveler 0, it's all about the one person's focus, because you are the main character of this game. It's your customizable insert. You even pick different qualities for your character at the very beginning of the game that may affect things later on. But for this whole thing, it's your journey and you're making decisions, and so it doesn't feel as vast. I don't have 7 other party members that I need to look out for and follow their stories and learn about who they are as people. I'm just recruiting various people from all over the world to rebuild my town because this is my story. And there's nothing wrong with that. The combat basics of Octopath are all there, with the brake system, the shields, the boost system to get extra turns. All that is still present, and so if you liked Octopath Traveler 1, I think you're at least going to like Octopath Traveler 0. But in my case, I can't say so far that I love the game the way that I did number 2. However, that said, I will at least be giving it the bronze medal for best re-release for the work that they did at changing this mobile game to fit in the console space. We got a new Katamari game. I should be much happier about this. But let me start by saying, the game is fine. It retains a lot of the qualities of the past Katamari games, but what makes it weird is the stuff that it opts to change. Let's start with the basic premise, though. Katamari doing the time travel gimmick, where, you know, the base Katamari gameplay is basically the same as it's always been, but you have different set pieces by traveling back to different eras in time. Might even change the landscapes that you're able to interact with that wouldn't have worked in a Katamari that was always in the present day. That's fine enough as a concept. There's plenty of humor that could have been derived from the King of all Cosmos interacting with the different time periods. As it stands, there's a couple jokes here and there, but they didn't feel all that grand to me. But as for the core gameplay itself, like I said, not much has really changed. They do give you a button option to use in place of shaking the sticks to do the dash maneuver. So maybe that's actually a considerable upgrade for some people, but I had been so used to the dual stick controls that I kind of stuck to the original input method for that. Anyway, the big thing about the game, though, is there are these crowns. The King of all Cosmos has lost a number of crowns, and you can find them in each stage. That sounds like a really good optional collectible to be added right alongside the presents and the cousins that you find in each stage. Wait, did I say optional? What I meant was they're completely required. At least most of them. You get to these roadblocks in the game where if you haven't collected a certain number of crowns, and the game does not tell you that you need to be collecting these except jokingly. They're like, please collect my crowns. I took that as a sign that, like, it would be great if I could grab the crowns. That's something to shoot for in each stage for 100% completion. I did not take it to mean the king will block your progress if you don't collect these things enough. So then you end up having to backtrack to stages. The point of backtracking to stages in Katamari is score chasing. It's always been an arcadey type of game. You would naturally go back to those stages because you know you can do better. And what makes it even weirder is that this game actually gives you the tools for score chasing that you might have felt were missing in past Katamari games. As you're rolling up items, you can actually see what rank you're gonna end the stage with. Like, ooh, I've got an A at the end of the stage, but maybe I can go for the S rank. Or, oh, I only got a C that time and there's like a minute left on the clock. Maybe I'll just restart the stage right now and go for at least a B. That's really good to see. Just having that there already would have increased my desire to go back to the stages. But when you force it on the player, then it feels more like a chore, and it kind of was. I just wanted to see the set pieces and the humor that this game would offer in line with its predecessors. And so right now, while it's an acceptable successor to the franchise, it's not the best it could have been. There's also a tacked-in multiplayer mode where you fight 3 other people rolling Katamaris around and try and bring stuff to a collection point. It felt very awkward to control the one time that the game makes you play it for tutorial purposes, and I never actually went online with it and played against other people because it just didn't strike me as a particularly fun time, but it is an option if you wish to explore it. Once Upon a Katamari will not be receiving any medals, but it is my number 28 game of the year. Maybe I have a little bit of a bias because my first console was the GameCube, and one of the games I owned on GameCube was Pac-Man World 2, but Pac-Man World 2 Repack is a dream. Although it's kind of a mixture of a dream and a nightmare. For the most part, this is a very good re-release. It faithfully remakes the original game in terms of its level structure, but there are some interesting changes to be had. For one, you don't need to collect all the pellets in each stage for 100%. Instead, they are used to do the pellet throwing maneuver that was found in Pac-Man World Repack. This is more useful in some later areas, but at the very beginning of the game, you're going to be wondering why it's even there in the first place. The projectile doesn't even go particularly far. For another thing, Packed Village is completely overhauled. They give you a lot more spaces to put up these optional gashapon collectible statues that you can get by completing objectives and stages or collecting tokens to spend at the gashapon. The annoying thing about the town is that now you can't get all the fruit on a first visit. You have to regrow the fruit by restoring the town. I like the idea of restoring the town by completing each major area, but I don't like the fact that it prevents you from getting 100% completion in that area until literally the very end of the game. So, thanks for that, Namco. The bosses are the biggest overhaul in this game for sure. The first boss is mostly identical to how it worked before. It does get some new attacks later on. But the other 3 bosses were completely overhauled because in the original game they were all essentially the same ghost robot, but you had to hit it with a butt bounce the first time that you fought it. You had to hit it with a rev roll the second time you fought it, and the third time you fought it you still had to hit it with a rev roll, but there were steam geysers everywhere that you had to avoid, and it was annoying. In this game though, every one of those 3 bosses has been replaced by an animal mech that fits in with the biome that you were just exploring. These are a little hit and miss. There's some interesting ideas, especially in the last one, but sometimes they feel a little clunky. Despite that, I had a fun time with them, and I think it was mostly a positive change to add some variety into the game. It is a little bit of a shame, though, for preservation purposes, that they didn't have some sort of option to fight those in some way, even if it wasn't in the main levels, maybe just a side thing somewhere. Some of the bosses are also very, very spongy. Like, you can spend a ridiculous amount of time fighting one only to lose and have to do it all over again. What's weird is one boss later actually has a checkpoint, so it's not as bad, but the bosses before that one that were also a little spongy did not have a checkpoint, so it's weird. The big thing is there's a post game. and I feel like I need to mention this is because it's part of the worthwhile factor of this re-release. Like, why did they change the moveset in the way that they did? Probably to accommodate some of the obstacles that they're going to be throwing at you in a variety of remix stages that you unlock at the end of the game. That said, they go overboard on the hazards here. I have yet to finish all of these stages. I have barely dabbled in them, if I'm completely honest. I was more interested in the original game. But when I was there, I could see the value in, like, being able to throw something at certain enemies. And the most important note of all, though, is the butt bounce physics do not feel the same. And I think that's on purpose because there's now a perfect butt bounce where you have to time a button press at the top of the butt bounce to bounce higher. And they do expect you to perform this maneuver to make certain otherwise impossible jumps. And that in itself is fine, but butt bouncing felt so much more satisfying on the GameCube, I have to say. Despite any flaws that I might come up with here, it felt like coming home to a certain degree, seeing a lot of these stages again, hearing the music, seeing it all redone with the modern graphics, having the voice from Pac-Man World 3 to expand on these cutscenes that existed in the original. Pac-Man World 2 Repack is earning my silver medal for best re-release. There sure was a new Hyrule Warriors game this year. Age of Imprisonment is a prequel to The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and I mean that 100% honestly. They were not fibbing this time around. Age of Calamity did what it did. But Age of Imprisonment, no, they took the cutscenes from Tears of the Kingdom and they put them in this game with, like, the redone graphics, of course. But then they expanded on what happened before and after those particular events that Link witnessed, and it all actually fits. There's, like, maybe one part that you can argue is a little weird and feels kind of retconny to make certain characters in this game work, but it's not as egregious as what Age of Calamity did. So if you are invested in the Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom universe, I recommend this game pretty much based on the virtue of its story. There's a lot more cutscenes in this game than any other Warriors game that I've played, which includes all the Nintendo crossover ones. There is something lost here, though, because I think the story ended up being too much of the focus, and that's a dangerous thing to say about a Nintendo game, I know, because this is what I wanted from them. It's what plenty of people wanted from them, is to have this cohesive story that is being told and focused on. So I'm glad, for once, that it actually was. But I do think that compared to other Nintendo Warriors games, that this one loses something in the gameplay department. Three Hopes remains my favorite one because of the immense focus on strategy. When I think of Warriors games, I'm thinking of taking enemy bases and defending my own and organizing my units to make effective decisions. But every stage in Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment feels like a straight line. They're not. I can tell you that much. There are even occasions where it might make sense to split your party in multiple directions. But for a large portion of the game, even if it's not one hallway and there's different ways to go, it just felt like, I'm gonna run through here, I'm gonna beat these enemies, I'm gonna go to the boss enemy, I'm gonna beat them, and then I'm gonna go to the next set and do it again and again and again. I know Warriors games are supposed to feel grindy, but it felt extra so in this game. As for some positives, the Sync Strike is a nice touch. It kind of builds on the partner specials from Three Hopes in a more meaningful way. Your partners are not paired together as one singular unit, but they are adjacent to each other on the field. You are building up a sync gauge by completing combos, and then you can unleash a dual attack together with its own special animation. Some of them are very creative in terms of how they'll combine the character's abilities, so they're pretty fun to pull off. This is in tandem with your usual special, as well as unique skills. This is the big one, because the game gives you a variety of implements to equip to those R button slots. So if I hit R and X, it'll do whatever's equipped to the X button. Same for Y, B, A, And then later you get ZR as a 5th option as well. So that's like 5 programmable attacks that are in there, and these can be the Zonai devices, or they can be fuse attacks, kind of like how Link would fuse stuff to his weapons in Tears of the Kingdom. Or they can be just character-specific special abilities, like Zelda's ability to recall. So each of those is effective against different enemy attacks. Unfortunately, these are incredibly predictable, like ridiculously so. Oh, the Hinox is rolling again. I'd better use the one that repels a charge attack. Or, oh, that guy's jumping again. I'd better use my air attack. So, I don't know. Some people have told me that combat in this game actually feels a good level of challenging, even on the normal difficulty, which is what I played on. But I never, ever struggled with combat. It could be fun, especially with the sync strikes and the unique attacks. I do want to give it its positives there. And the game runs super well on Switch too, so we can finally get the full satisfaction of mowing down these hordes and seeing every last bit of it. But I was defeating level 80 missions when I was level 60. It did not feel particularly tough to me. And so maybe I'm just really good at these games. I guess that could be a possibility. If you find it the right level of challenging, that's great. But for me, that kind of deteriorated from the experience a little bit. Also, the world map is a major step down from Age of Calamity. In Age of Calamity, you could make out the finer details on the world map as you build it out, doing the various missions. They bring back that system in Tears of the Kingdom, but it's like super ancient Hyrule, and so I can't tell what anything is besides the general shape of the continent. It all looks like the same patch of teal-colored forest patches and some dirt sprinkled in on the map. I don't know, the individual waypoints give you the context for where you are, but it did not feel like as cool of a map in my mind. I couldn't really imagine myself there the way I could in Age of Calamity. There's also this element of liberating territories, which, hey, that's always fun to see something go from Ganon's control to your control on the map. But then you'd also have to defend it later, which I guess is realistic. Ganon's not just gonna sit there and take it. He's gonna send more enemies to try and take it back, but it was padding. It was definitely just padding things out to be like, whoops, guess that area is not complete after all. So there was one of those for every region. It became something. That said, I'll reiterate, the reason to pick up this game, if you're gonna pick up this game, and I might even encourage you to do so at a discount, is to experience that prequel story, which is super solid. The new characters of all things are ones that I particularly grew attached to, and I love how they connected them back to the Tears of the Kingdom narrative. No spoilers about it, but to give you an idea of which characters I'm talking about, it's the one that gives you the special stages in the air. There are special stages, and those are the best bits of combat in the game, let me tell you. It's fun to dodge stuff and to shoot stuff down. Really fun idea there. Glad to see it brought into fruition. Anyway, these cutscenes are elevated by the work done with the voice cast, and I think they allowed me to grow attached to the characters. So for Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, I'm giving the bronze medal for voice performance. Sea of Stars is a callback to many RPGs that I very much enjoyed, and so Sea of Stars was almost my game of the year when it came out, only to be slightly defeated by Octopath Traveler 2 in the end. But a lot of it's input-based combat, where you had to time things just like the good old days. It felt super satisfying. The soundtrack was also something to behold. And in particular, the visual splendor of Sea of Stars. Holy crap, was that something. The pixel work there is immaculate. Felt really good to witness, and the animated cutscenes were no slouch either. But the one criticism that the game seemed to garner was that the narrative wasn't as strong as it could be, particularly that two of our main characters didn't really feel like fully fleshed out characters. So what if a free update came to the game that actually addressed this? Throes of the Watchmaker is a free expansion to Sea of Stars that gives you a few new areas to explore that takes place a little later in the game, but the focus of this DLC is the two main characters, Belair and Zale. You get to know about their particular character flaws through some struggles that they have with a part of their personality that is emerging, and you have to fight these parts of themselves, and so you're up against some of your strongest opponents yet. I will say, revisiting the game all this time later, it took me some time to get back into the combat, and I do think that there is just some extra challenge here, which, hey, if you're playing the free update to the game, you probably played the game anyway, so you should be just about ready for it. Never felt unfair, of course. The final boss was also a special kind of treat. I love what they did with that one. I don't want to spoil it, but there's set pieces that connect it back to something you do in the main game, and just really fun time to be had. In this area, though, you are separated from the main story, so your classes are actually completely reset. You have these new circus-themed classes with their own attacks and their own action commands, so you get the joy of learning how to do those and mastering them all over again, which is perfectly fine in my book. Throes of the Watchmaker is the gold medal recipient for Best Content Update of 2025. Fast Fusion was a launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2, so it had some early eyes on it. It's smaller than its previous counterpart, Fast RMX and Fast Racing Neo, or at least it feels that way when you first get into it. I know that there are updates coming for this game, but what's there is still really fun to race around. It's also a really good graphical showcase for the system, and that's despite the very small team behind it. But anyway, Fast Fusion is your futuristic racer. You're taking off at super high speeds with these gorgeous vistas around you. What makes this one different is a few different things. So for one, this game has a jump button. This was not in the previous games, but now you have to actually decide when's the right time to jump. Are there orbs up in the air that you can jump to collect to fill your boost meter? Is there a shortcut where if you jump over some terrain you would crash into, then you'll actually find a secret road that leads back to the main track, but is, again, shorter, because that's what a shortcut is. Can you land on your opponent to take some of their boost energy for yourself? That's a really fun thing whenever that manages to work. That said, it is missing online multiplayer, so it would be fun to do that with actual other people and not just the CPUs or the local person, because I don't have a local second person to play with, unfortunately. Besides that, it retains the game's core mechanic of collecting the boost energy and changing the phase of your car from orange and blue to match boost zones on the track so that you get the maximum speed possible, all while dodging obstacles like fan blades or winds blowing you off course and other stuff like that. And then, of course, the namesake Fusion comes from the fact that with any of the vehicles in the game, you can go to the shop and you can purchase a fusion of any two vehicles, which will give you some sort of combination average of their stats as well as their appearance. So it can be a fun thing to mess around with, but you also don't really have to. You don't have to overthink it. You can just pick with a base model car and be perfectly fine, but like, hey, you might as well. That's basically what the in-game money is there for. So, that said, between its refinement of what came before and the addition of the jump button, Fast Fusion earns the bronze medal for traversal. Earlier I mentioned that I grew up with the GameCube, so I was not a Sega kid, at least not more than getting Sonic Adventure Director's Cut and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle on the GameCube. Like, I didn't even know that Sega was a company that made systems. All I knew was Nintendo. But anyway, a Sega franchise made a comeback this year, and that is Shinobi. So Shinobi takes what came before and turns it into something new. Wow, that was a great sentence coming from me. My point is that Shinobi Art of Vengeance is kind of a Metroidvania. You do still have your stages, and you are doing 2D side-scrolling platforming and beat 'em up action combat in these areas, but you're also unlocking abilities, and there are elements of each stage that you can't access without certain abilities, so that gives you the motivation to go back and find other stuff. There are some worthwhile collectibles to get by doing this, like different special attacks or other equipable items that augment your stats in some way. So it's up to you how you want to fit out Joe Musashi for this newest mission. But man, the biggest praise I can give to Shinobi Art of Vengeance is in the visual department. Some of these areas look downright splendorous, and the water effects are the best that I've seen in any game this year. There are certain stages where it is just splashing up at you, and it is caught in such fine detail, despite being a 2D game to boot. Combat is a little more hit and miss with me. I mostly enjoy the combat. I especially like the execution system. When you've done enough damage with certain attacks to enemies, you've built up this execution meter, and so then a kanji shows up above their head, and if you press the right button, then Joe will immediately dash over to where they are, no matter where you're standing, and execute them in one final hit. And you can chain these together. If you get multiple enemies in that state, then you just execute them in a big chain, and the bigger chain you have, the better rewards that you get, like money and stuff that drops from the enemies. That's a really fun thing, as well as similar to Hyrule Warriors, you've got your R button specials. There's like 8 of them in the game, and you can equip up to 4 of them to the face buttons, so you might do some experimenting, figure out which ones work best for you. I particularly like the water ninpo, which acts as a counter, and so that can come in clutch sometimes for sure. But yeah, for the most part, it's just really solid action combat. The bosses felt pretty fair for the most part. A decent amount of challenge on them, though. Definitely had to retry them a few times. Except, here's the thing. The combat is not the most challenging part of this game to me. It has its challenge, and it's a fair level of challenge, but something that was more challenging that almost felt unfair was the platforming sections. If you're going for 100%, there are dedicated platforming sections where you need to use abilities like your grapple to navigate especially tricky spaces. Like, some of these are not for the faint of heart, again, myself included. I guess this was the year of giving up on challenges, because I have already mentioned doing that a number of times on this list, like with Hollow Knight. So be warned, if you play this game, do not go for everything unless you are hardcore, ready to commit to really learning certain elements of this game's platforming and combat. If you do not have that level of dedication, you can still get through the game without having to do all that extra stuff. 100% is totally optional, but I figured I'd put it out there because the game gives you the tools to get 100% when you're backtracking through other areas, and so it might actually be something that you just start to click with and go for, but then you'll hit that one challenge and be like, why did I do this? At least that's how I felt. But I ended up finishing the main story of Shinobi Art of Vengeance anyway, so it was still a good time. For everything that happens in combat, Shinobi earns the bronze medal for animation, as well as the silver medal for sound design and the silver medal for art direction. Imagine being trapped in one place all your life. All you know is this one place. You know it intimately well. There are plenty of people with whom you've made connections, but something leaves you wanting. You've got the wanderlust. You just want to see the world that's out there. Behold all that it has to offer you. But, alas, you can't, because you're the chosen one, and you must defend Lumio City. So, of course, I'm talking about Pokemon Legends ZA. If you want to start right off the bat with the impression I had of this game, it was immense disappointment. When we heard about a new Pokemon Legends game, I was thinking about the vast areas that were in Pokemon Legends Arceus, the vibes that were set by the music and the skybox and the general art style. It looks so good looking back. I mean, like, it's still a Pokemon game and there's room for polish on graphics in any of them, but like compared to some of the other modern entries, it's night and day. So when I heard about this Lumiose City adventure in ZA, before we knew much about the game, I was thinking, okay, Lumiose City is your hub, like Jubilife Village, and you'll venture out into the area around Lumiose City and do the Pokemon Legends thing. But all the stuff you collect and all the Pokemon you catch will go towards helping rebuild Lumiose City. It would be like if we had to rebuild Jubilife Village in the first game. It would add that extra sense of progression. It would be so cool to work on. It would add to the lore of the game. I even thought, I don't know why anyone thinks that the Pokemon Company cares enough about the lore to do something like this, but I even thought maybe the reason we're rebuilding the city is because we went back in time to a time when it was affected by the war or the Great Event. But no, actually ZA is a sequel to X and Y, not a prequel, so there goes any of that potential. They instead wanted to wrap up loose ends of that plot, and I'm surprised at how much they actually leaned into the plot of X and Y here. I thought this might end up being a standalone adventure after my initial impression was shot down, but instead you are meeting with AZ, and you do meet up with other characters who either are from X and Y or are descendants of people from X and Y, or are at least, you know, analog to people from X and Y. Spiritual successors in some cases. And so it kind of pays to have knowledge of X and Y going into this one. I'm not going to say it's strictly necessary to enjoy the game, but from a story perspective, you might have some question marks if you don't know anything about those games. And that feels like a weird decision when we're so far removed from X and Y in time at this point. But whatever. Let's talk about what this game actually does now, and that is it gives you an adventure all throughout Lumiose City, which, hey, it's a little bigger than I thought it would end up being. So, like, I don't know, the vast area thing isn't the worst it could possibly be. Within the city are wild zones where people are trying to cohabitate with Pokemon, but some of them are just too wild. So, you know, Quasartico Inc. has got holograms that act as fences that keep the Pokemon fenced into certain areas, but it's completely uprooting city life. People are taking notice of this. Some people just want the wild zones to be eliminated altogether, and others are like, I hate them, but they need to stay. And so you arrive in the city as a complete tourist. We don't know who we are in relation to anyone else here. We're just a random vacationer. We came on the train. This is supposed to be some sort of vacation for us. And then we get lumped into a Chosen One prophecy, and it feels completely, absolutely, and totally forced. Like, I am the most random person in the universe, and yet here I am, the one with the power to save the city, and everyone knows it 5 minutes after I'm here. Sure, why not? Let's just roll with that. It's all just an elaborate excuse to get you into the Pokemon battling, which is the heart of this game. Pokemon battling is the #1 thing about this game. Catching, not as fun as it was in Arceus, because there's less elements of sneaking around. Some of the wild zones are so cramped that there is not a chance that you escape the sight of wild Pokemon. And you're either going to have to battle them to wind down their HP, or just, go for it. Chuck the balls. Pray. So, sorry, I liked the stealth element in Arceus to use it sometimes, but it's not here. So instead we have Pokemon battling in the ZA Royale. Pokemon battling is completely overhauled in this game as we switch from turn-based to real-time combat. And instead of your attacks having power points, that means they can only be used a certain number of times in the turn-based games, they instead have cooldowns, so they're always on the table, but you might need to wait 12 seconds for your next Hydro Pump, if you know what I mean. This gives certain moves new utility. Some of them had to be reworked for this new system, like, hey, Toxic Spikes is now a hazard that's actually on the field, and you can potentially avoid that hazard. So yeah, you have area of effects, you have cooldowns, you have certain ones that need to charge up, like Solar Beam, for example. You might need to be sitting somewhere for a couple seconds. That gives your enemy a chance to move. So there's lots of stuff at play here, and it feels pretty good. It's very fast-paced. Like, battles are over so much quicker than they ever were in any other game. And sometimes it feels like I'm either doing really, really well and creaming my opponent, or the other way around. Like, I find it hard to strike that middle ground where I'm like having a challenge against the enemy, but not too much. I'm still kind of holding my own. I either sweep them or don't. That was my experience at any rate. But then in the ZA Royale, they do actually try and bring back the stealth element from Arceus. They let you sneak attack your opponents, and that can effectively knock out their first Pokemon in one move if you chose effectively. Of course, if they see you, then forget about that. You're just jumping straight into the battle. Later on, they try and mix in some trainers that are higher than your rank so that you can get more of that challenge. You typically find them on the rooftops as opposed to ground level. So, hey, you can try and challenge yourself there, but never felt like too much of a jump once I had gotten my team going. Anyway, story gets a little wild at the end, and I'm not going to be talking about that. But, things happen in a direction that you're probably not expecting. So, where I land on this game is that it's fine. It's a fine game, but it's not the Legends game that I wanted. But it's fine if it's the one you wanted. I think if you have a connection to X and Y, that this game is going to hit you a lot differently. Or if you see the real-time combat in action and you're like, I need a piece of that for myself, I might even do the online against other people, then, you know, have at it. But for the single-player aspect, as someone who didn't particularly care that much about Pokemon Y despite playing it, and someone who was more into the single-player element of exploring around and stealthing on Pokemon, I just gotta say, this one didn't quite do it in the same way as Arceus for me. Pokemon Legends ZA is not receiving any medals, but it was good enough that I'm calling it my number 22 game of the year. Over the past few years, I've been going to the PAX East convention in Boston. And when you're on the show floor, one thing that you really want to keep an eye out for is some standout indie developers that you might not have caught otherwise. But you see their booth, you see that they've got a spark of an idea and a passion and just a joy about them. And that immediately ingratiates you to their game. For me, a couple years back, and now having released this year, that was A Corgi's Cozy Hike by Skulisco Games. This is a two-person developing team, one person on the programming and one person on the art, and that's what you get. But together, they made a game about a corgi. It plays a lot like Spyro the Dragon, in the fact that you're roaming around an open 3D area, you're completing little missions for the NPCs, you've got a cape with which you can glide. It's all just very cute. Very cute is what I can say. The graphics are also kind of PS1 era callback in terms of how blocky they are, and that is by design. To be clear, that is exactly what they're calling back to. Things like Spyro and Crash. You've got crates you can break in the Crash front. But another thing that makes this game truly stand out is the fact that the proceeds go towards animal rescue. And that theme is even embedded in the game itself. You are a corgi and you are a pet on a rescue mission. Not one particular rescue mission, but like lots of little rescue missions to improve the lives of people on this island. There are so many cute touches with the different costumes you can equip, the corgi butt power that gets utilized every time you do a butt slam, the fact that the corgi can eat its own poop like a real corgi, the fact that you mark your territory at fire hydrants and that fills out your map. There's so much charm oozing from this game, and a lot of that is owed to the spectacular art direction from one of the team members. And so as such, A Corgi's Cozy Hike is getting the bronze medal for art direction. You know, part of me feels a little bad putting Mario Kart World right above the two-person developed Corgi game. But if I'm honest with myself, I did play it a little more than A Corky's Cozy Hike, which I'm still working on. Mario Kart World is a game that launched unfinished. I'm just gonna come right out and say it. There is a baseline level of fun and a baseline level of quality that comes with being a Mario Kart game. However, there are fundamental quality of life features that kept it from being its fullest, at least until after launch. Over the course of this year, there have been a number of updates that improve how online track selection works, and that add elements to the free roam map that make tracking your progress an actual thing you can do, which is the #1 thing it needed from the get-go. I am so much more likely to invest time in free roam and enjoy the return of what is effectively DS's mission mode in the form of those P-switches when I know exactly which ones I've already found on the map. Why did it take that long? I don't know. As for what was always in the game since launch, you had a variety of pretty nice looking tracks and a decent roster of characters, which is mostly padded out by all the costume slots on the same screen. This is still the dumbest thing in the game and needs to be patched immediately. Why it doesn't work the same way as Smash Ultimate with the Echo Fighter selection is absolutely beyond me. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had it right the first time with the Yoshi colors, and yet here we are with Nintendo being Nintendo. Sometimes it's not great. Anyway, I was trying to talk about the redeeming qualities of Mario Kart World, and one of them is Knockout Tour. Knockout Tour is an absolutely phenomenal multiplayer mode that really keeps you on the edge of your seat, changes things up. It gives you a longer play session instead of those shorter races, so it's a nice change of pace in that regard. And I mean, of course, it's longer if you're staying in it until the top 4, which doesn't always happen, but hey, that is what it is. I do like the base idea of Mario Kart World, which is that the world is tied together, and Knockout Tour is what makes that base concept work. There's a reason all the tracks are connected. It's because you're on this really long circuit from one end of the map to another. Some people don't like the intermissions in Grand Prix, and I will at least admit that when it comes up online and people don't want to play it, that they shouldn't be forced into that predicament. But if you're in the single player Grand Prix and you're doing the drive from one course to another, then it does add a certain vibe to things. And they did also do another patch that spices up some of the routes from Koopa Troopa Beach in particular, and adds a second lap to that course when you get there. So, hey, maybe they are listening to some degree and they're trying to flesh out this experience in a way that's going to make us happy, but it's so hard to tell. So, between mission mode and Knockout Tour and just regular online with friends once in a while, I really can't call Mario Kart World a bad game, just one that's got some missed potential. Where they did not miss potential, though, is with the soundtrack, because my goodness, that's where all the development time must have gone. There's over 300 songs in this game, and at least 90% of them are at least good, if not phenomenal, rearrangements of past Mario Kart games and past Mario platforming games. There's even a few odd ones out, like Mario Paint, Yoshi's Island, Yoshi's Story. WarioWare has a remix in there somewhere. It would be nice if I could listen to like whatever music I wanted in the game, but even as it stands with the random ones coming up, because there's so many good songs in the game, you're very likely not going to be disappointed by what comes up in the random selection and free roam, or between courses and Grand Prix. That's another place music can change. So I think for the soundtrack alone, you might justify getting this game. But even without the soundtrack, you do have the new Knockout Tour mode. You have the missions in free roam that are a lot like the single player content on DS, and you've got classic online experiences a la Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So I can't call it a bad game. I can only call it missed potential. Mario Kart World is receiving the bronze medal for best multiplayer, as well as the silver medal for best soundtrack, and the silver medal for best box art. Because look at this box art with all the heart drivers crammed into one giant world space and a view of the map in the background. It is colorful, it is lively, it is exactly what I want from a box. Actually, I say it's what I want from a box, but ironically, as I'm going through my list here, my number 19 game is receiving the gold medal for box art, and that's Ghost of Yotei. So let's talk about that box and what it conveys about the game as I segue into this segment. The box art features our main character Atsu perched with the Yotei mountain in the background and 6 swords plunged into the ground around her. Ginkgo leaves are falling, and she's holding the sash with the names of the Yotei 6. This sets the stage for the story. She carries this sash around, and with each member of the Yotei 6 destroyed, she will cross out their name in their blood. And this is the story of her revenge mission, because the Yotei 6 did some messed up stuff to her family when she was super young, and so moving into adulthood after spending some time away from home, she comes back and starts on this mission. It's not as compelling a story as Ghost of Tsushima. I've just got to put that out there right now. It's a set piece that allows us to get a Ghost of Tsushima sequel. But if you liked the story of Ghost of Tsushima, and that was the main thing drawing you to that game, and not the open world exploration with all the side stuff that happens in that same game, then I don't know if Ghost of Yotei is going to hit quite the same way. Ghost of Yotei puts so much more focus on that exploration, that side stuff. You are very much encouraged to roam the lands almost at random when you're going between story missions. And of course, the game does a good job of rewarding you for your exploration. A lot of the same things from Ghost of Tsushima carry over, like hot springs that will increase your maximum health. But there's a few new elements for Yotei as well, such as wolf dens that increase your wolf connection. And this is one of my main gripes with the game, actually, is that the wolf does a bit too much in its default settings. I kind of forgot that you could adjust how much the wolf does in the settings menu. I left it where it was by default to see the developer intended experience for this game. But unfortunately, there was one point where I was doing a one-on-one boss fight and then I died, which was fine. I was ready to try that fight again, but the wolf came and saved me. And that's when I knew it was too much. But there actually is I looked back at the options menu when I was reviewing for this video. As it turns out, you can turn off the wolf completely. Or you can also just turn it off for duels specifically, so I didn't need to have the experience I did. Whoops. But again, I'm judging by the default setting here. It also feels like combat is much less stealth focused than it was in Tsushima. You still have the stealth options. You can assassinate from hiding in the grass or up in the air on tripwires. But in enemy camps, it feels a lot easier to get bogged down by enemies. A lot of time, the amount of stealth options available felt smaller, and I would find myself getting noticed by someone and then just fighting off the ensuing onslaught of enemies, but not really struggling all that much to fight them off because there are so many more options for head-to-head combat. In this game, instead of stances that you switch between that are effective against enemy types, you have weapons, which are effective against other weapon types. The Karashigama is by far the best addition in this game because it also adds another stealth option where you can whip someone with the sickle from a distance and then pull their body towards you to hide it. It is very satisfying in that regard, and that's the kind of thing I wish I had more of, actually. But yeah, combat feels a lot more fierce, head-to-head, like, just deal with it, and at the same time, it's totally possible to deal with it, especially if you've got a little wolf companion by your side that is on by default and helping you fend off the crowd. The story took some, I'm just gonna say, predictable turns, in my opinion. There is one area that I felt had the strongest story moments in any part of the game. It is the Northern Ice region, whose name I forget at this time. but what happens there is great. If the whole game was like that, it would probably be higher on this list. But as it stands, what it is a decent follow-up to Ghost of Tsushima that doesn't do as much for the story, but does expand on all that side stuff and the world around you. As such, Ghost of Yotei earns the bronze medal for exploration in addition to its gold medal for box art. Sword of the Sea is a game that takes after Journey. Pretty sure it's even made by the same people. You've got this open environment, you've got wordless storytelling, and you're just moving through this environment on a journey. And when you've reached the end of that journey, then you will know how the story has played out. But the difference this time is that you're Tony Hawk. See, Sword of the Sea, you don't use your sword like a sword. That would be ridiculous. They took the Metaphor Refantasio approach and used the sword as a skateboard. And it is satisfying. It's actually really fun to skate along the desert sands or the ocean waters, or the desert sands that turn into ocean waters as you restore the area. There's all sorts of movement mechanics that are tied to certain things that will show up in the environment when you've restored it. Like whenever you get kelp or algae or whatever to show up, then it will propel you upward as long as you stand inside of it. So that's a good way to gain some height. Just like any skateboarding game, there are tricks and combos you can perform. And there's certain little areas where you could actually have to earn a certain number of trick points to get some unlocks. Double jumping in this game is also really satisfying, especially with the accompanying sound that goes with it. So just to be clear, this game is a pretty short, succinct little romp, but it is a sight to behold. The movement feels so good, especially with the DualSense I was using, having that haptic rumble in there as I was, again, gliding across different surfaces on my skateboard sword, or my skate sword, as it were. By the end, areas get a little more intense, and there is a story that plays out, once again, wordlessly, but it's told very well with the visuals. I don't know that it was the most amazing story ever that I've ever experienced, and there's so much up for interpretation there that, like, who knows how good it really is, if that makes any sense. Sword of the Sea earns the bronze medal in environment design and the gold medal in sound design. A big chunk of my year was taken up by playing Split Fiction with a friend of mine. Unfortunately, we were not able to see it through to the end with each other, and I never finished the game as a result because of, personal complications. I mean, life happens. It comes up. It happens to the best of us. But it is a little sad that we didn't get to finish, because boy, does this game give you a showcase of teamwork. It can feel really good to pull off. I think the fantasy areas especially have some of the best puzzles in the game. You've really gotta work together, time things out, and communicate. But it's surprisingly easy to communicate, even because there were times where we did not play on voice chat. And yet we were still pulling off maneuvers that seemed like it would have really taken good communication. But just from the visuals of being able to see what your partner is doing, and then, effectively silently signaling to each other that you're ready for them to do the next thing that needs to be activated so that you can do the next thing that you need to activate. I'm putting everything in general terms here to avoid specific mechanic spoilers, of course, although some of the trailers for the game do spoil some pretty late game stuff, I gotta say. This is all wrapped up in a competent story of two writers who are having their ideas stolen by this sci-fi machine that will extract the stuff from their brains or something, I guess. I'm pretty sure we skipped the opening cutscene and I never went back and looked it up, so I don't know the full context, actually, but that didn't matter because we're in the worlds of these writers, and through the cutscenes that play out between different worlds, you start learning more about the personal backstories of these writers, why their stories are the way they are, and that's something I feel like I can connect to, at least on some level, having had aspirations of writing myself, and then moving on to writing stuff like music. So it's not bad. I do think that maybe some of the characters don't necessarily feel like characters. They're reacting to the crazy set pieces that are happening around them in fairly generic ways, like, whoa, I can't believe we just did that. And I think that deprives a little bit from the characterization. Like, at a certain point, I remember thinking to myself, this character is not a character. This character is the backstory of their character. Because their backstory is like super tragic and relatable and sad, but what do we really know about the character herself? We know how she's responding to it, we know how she's writing about it, but it felt like something was missing there. That said, the game does have its fun set pieces, it does have its unique cooperative elements that require you to puzzle things out. It's got some fun boss battles. There's one near the end of how much I played that was really, really super fun to pull off, and if I didn't feel like it was a major spoiler, I would tell you all about it with the greatest of praise. But there is fun to be had in Split Fiction when you've got the right person on your side, and I'm glad that it seemed like I had the right one on mine. I'm giving Split Fiction the bronze medal in puzzle design, the silver medal in accessibility options, as you can change stuff like whether or not you need to rotate the stick or mash buttons, and you can set that for each player. And finally, I'm giving it the silver medal for best multiplayer. We all waited a very long time for Metroid Prime 4 after its initial announcement in 2017. But of course, development restarted partway through as certain expectations were not being met. But that said, the team that took over the project couldn't exactly scrap everything from the original project. And there was this determination that this story would focus more on the Galactic Federation soldiers. We would put some faces to them, give them some real characters, and see how Samus fares with them. The thing is, though, that even though it's been shown in past games that Samus can absolutely communicate using words, even spoken voice, she just doesn't here. And that makes this attempt at a story a little awkward in practice. I don't think the Federation characters are as bad as many outlets will make them out to be. You're not really around them all that long. But that said, I can see how especially the first member, Miles McKenzie, can overstay his welcome a little bit when it comes to guiding you around the area, not really giving you that same sense as the past Metroid Prime games of having to figure out where to go for yourself. Being able to call him on the radio is certainly a good option for players to be able to access stuff if they don't know where they're going, but he'll just kind of come on automatically. And if you're just roaming the desert collecting stuff, that can kind of detract from the vibe. What doesn't detract from the vibe is the areas themselves. This is an absolute showpiece for the Switch 2, even though it's also on Switch 1. From the lush jungles of Fury Green to the complete and total ambience of Ice Belt, these areas are something to behold. The ice area in particular is my favorite in this game. I think it perfectly blends the atmosphere of the old games with what they were aiming for with the Federation in this new game. Now, as you're exploring these areas, trying to find your way off this distant planet, you will encounter, of course, with this being a Metroid game, different abilities that will allow you to access areas, including places in past locations that you couldn't access before. Some of these are a little on the simple side, like your elemental beams. You've got fire and ice for one. And Prime is no stranger to using these things. And they have their combat utilities as well, especially the ice beam. That one helped me with a particularly challenging set of enemies. But on the other side, you've got your psychic abilities. At first, it just sounds like they've plastered the word psychic onto all the old abilities, but as you play around with these, they actually do have new utilities that are justified by the psychic mechanics. The very first example you have is your charge beam. When you're using the psychic equivalent, you temporarily freeze time and control it using your pointer or mouse controls or your right stick if you're playing dual stick. And this is used to navigate certain obstacles, solve certain puzzles. I find it very interesting how they managed to incorporate this particular feature into certain fights. When the bike was shown in one of the early trailers, I was actually excited for this element. I thought the idea of connecting these places with a hub world actually made a lot more sense. Like, think back to Prime 1. You had to navigate the different elevators that took you to different areas. It didn't feel totally natural to me because they were just these random elevators all over the place that just so happened to connect all the areas. So the idea of Soul Desert and the Viola was actually one that I was on board with, but the problem is how barren the desert truly is. There's a couple little shrine type things borrowing from Breath of the Wild that test you on some of your abilities and give you some small unlocks, but the majority is filled with these crystals that you have to collect in order to get a certain item in the game. They're all just identical. It can be hard to hit them with the bike in my experience, so I might be missing some. They don't infinitely respawn. There's actually a set number of them if you want all of them, and boy did I waste my time getting all of them and then getting nothing in return, so thanks for that, game. So, Metroid Prime 4 has its moments of ambience that are on par with the originals. It has some interesting new abilities to add on to the existing arsenal of Samus Aran. But the characters will be hit or miss, as well as the general narrative direction. And that open desert area does bring everything to a screeching halt after you get through the main areas of the game. It was absolutely a kill to the pacing that probably should not have been an issue in the first place. Also, a little side note is that I don't really know much about Sylux because I never finished Metroid Prime Hunters and I definitely never played Federation Force. Not that I think those games really expand on him in any meaningful way, but it's worth noting that if you really want to know anything about him, you would better be the type of player who is going about scanning everything and everyone and reading up on the log entries, because most of what you need to know about the main villain of the game is hidden away there. I would have liked to see a little more of that up front and not quote-unquote implied by things that I didn't even know what I was looking at. But that said, I'm giving Metroid Prime 4 the gold medal for environment design because of its amazing landscapes. To everyone's disbelief, Level 5 actually managed to finish a game that they announced some time ago. We finally got to see the sequel to Fantasy Life. And this one mostly delivers. It can be quite fun to go around, perform your different jobs, try and keep track of various tasks like chopping down trees and catching fish and fighting off a certain number of enemies. But I will admit, somehow it felt way grindier than the first game. And don't get me wrong, that's always what Fantasy Life has been. Leveling up your jobs has, and probably always would be, a grind fest of little missions you have to fulfill. Like, make this many furniture items as a carpenter, or slay this type of enemy using this combat class. But Fantasy Life I still manages to make it enjoyable despite those little extra bits. There's a small story at play, has to do with time travel, of course. And the story is split among three main areas. You've got the past, the present, and Ginormosia, which is impossible for me to pronounce, as I just demonstrated. Ginormosia is like a little Breath of the Wild area that doesn't become plot relevant until way too late in the game. The game reminds you that you can go there at any time and explore stuff, but if you just go there after the tutorial bit that takes place there, you're going to be wondering what in the heck you're even doing there. It wasn't until the very end of the game that I was actually encouraged by the main story to go and explore there, and then it just felt like I had this giant hill to climb. It's kind of like the desert in Metroid Prime 4 when you think about it, except it's way more full, more rich with stuff to do as you go to your Breath of the Wild style towers, and you can even level up regions so that you're always on level with the stuff in the area. and getting worthwhile rewards out of the place. You're not just grinding the same level 2 enemies all the time. So that actually is a thoughtful feature. But the bulk of the game takes place in the past and the present as you do the typical fantasy life thing, explore areas, fight off monsters, encounter different quirky characters who will help you along your way. But this one also has an Animal Crossing New Horizons style element where you can decorate your island with houses and invite people to live there. And yeah, I mean, it's even an island, so like it's got New Horizons and Breath of the Wild written all over it. The inspirations are clear, but somehow the combination just kind of works with what Fantasy Life already was. I would encourage people to play this game in multiplayer because the final boss in particular just felt really cheap with how it would kill my computer-controlled allies. And it felt like that without those allies, I wasn't doing a decent amount of damage to it. So I've actually never beaten the final boss in this game. I got all the way there though, so I've seen most of what this game has to offer. They've also been updating the game ever since. I don't know that I felt compelled to go back to it when it's a bit of a mood killer when I can't kill the final boss because my computer-controlled allies don't know what they're doing. So like if I can't finish the main story, why would I want to engage with the rest of the game? That's what brought it down for me. But for a while, this was a comfort game. And I can absolutely see people continuing to get enjoyment out of this one. It didn't win any medals, but Fantasy Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time, is my number 15 game of the year. Xenoblade Chronicles X is something special. It is a massive world that is really yours to make of it. You are a survivor of a crash of the White Whale ship on the planet Mira as it was trying to escape the destruction of Earth and preserve humanity. So as one of the remaining human settlers on this new planet, you need to find your way to survive. Not just for yourself, but for the entirety of the human race. There is a bit of a ticking clock element to the plot here. But you managed to team up with one of the best, most competent human allies that you possibly can in the form of Elma. And as a member of her team, you set off on the main story. But in between everything in the main story, you have this vast open world to explore. So many different enemy types that you can run into. And it's yours how you choose to go about it. The best way to explain is with the game's own divisions, which is actually something that in this re-release takes a bit of a hit. In the Wii U original, these divisions were tied to an online element of the game where you could earn rewards based on how well players in your same division did. But that element has been completely removed and divisions are now cosmetic, or at least as cosmetic as you allow them to be. I was going to do a whole separate video on this that I never ended up bringing into full fruition and releasing. But what makes the divisions matter still is the role-playing element. It's what you invest into them. This time around, I tried out a new division in the form of the Outfitters. This group's role for human survival is to develop weapons and test them against indigenous enemies. You know, that way we can fend for ourselves. I had never been an outfitter before, but trying it this time, I tried to put more of a focus on the weapon element of the game. Like, were there any good ones available in the shop, or could I customize them with certain augments? Can I build a new weapon from different materials? Definitive Edition adds so many quality of life features that make something like this possible, because now I'm able to track materials that I need for certain weapons on the map. And this goes for the side quests and for anything else that you might want to track in this game. It is now easier than ever to find what you need without having to look up some intricate online guide. There is one exception to this, with like the biggest side quest in the game still not being clear as day. But if you ignore that one, or if you just engage with that one using an online guide, then still everything is here. The UI for this game has been completely overhauled to make it work in both handheld and TV mode in legible for the first time. It was not very easy to make things out on the Wii U, but here on the Switch, the game truly gets to shine. And then, yeah, as you explore this area, you've got to jump with really low gravity because you are on a different planet. And you eventually get the ability to purchase a mech that can jump even higher, or eventually fly around the planet altogether. All of this is in the trailers. That's why I feel comfortable saying as such. But they will make you work for these things. Sometimes it's just fun to see how much you can platform on your own before unlocking the mech, and you can get to some places that you might not actually expect. But at any point, nothing is really keeping you from getting anywhere besides maybe jump height. But if you want to completely ignore the first continent for a while and swim across the ocean to reach what would probably be considered the fourth continent in the game, there is absolutely no barrier stopping you. Like, you might run into some enemies on the way, and if you're not careful, something over leveled will wipe the floor with you, but it doesn't matter. You can keep trying. Eventually, you can find a way to get to where you want to go, and you can do it in the order that you want. There's even lower level stuff on the further out continents, which kind of encourages this approach of just exploring for the sake of exploring. The story is solid enough, but Definitive Edition adds an additional chapter that kind of serves as an epilogue to the original's cliffhanger ending. And it's kind of divisive with how it handles things. The story feels a little out of place in this version of the game. It refers back to some materials in the Xeno universe that you probably weren't expecting them to refer back to. And it comes up with a very interesting explanation for events. So I don't know that it has the payoffs that some people were hoping for, but if you just wanted them to put a bow on the story so that you can call it finished, it's definitely finished now. I can say that much. Make of it what you will. The 13th chapter focuses largely on a new character, and your enjoyment is going to greatly vary depending on how much you connect with that character in particular. I appreciate getting to revisit this game in the best form that it's ever been, fully functioning, and technically speaking, content complete at this point. So, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition wins the gold medal for best re-release of 2025. You know, there's something in the water at Devolver Digital, because even their worst presentation of all time managed to give us a legitimately good and interesting game. At Summer Game Fest, we got the Devolver Direct that focused entirely on Ball Pit, and I say it was their worst presentation ever because the jokes did not land, and that's what you go to those presentations for. All of it was just putting emphasis on the balls. And like, haha, we get it. Those were some low-hanging fruit, if you know what I mean. As for Ball Pit, though, this game by Tennyson and Friends, it's actually really, really, really fun. So fun that I've put it 13th on this list of really good games. I'm actually a sucker for the old school Breakout games, and so seeing that transformed into this run-based game with the select one of 3 perks approach, and this is the one that was meant to click with me. And then add on to that the visceral satisfaction of seeing so many projectiles bounce around the screen and knowing that 95% of those projectiles are you hitting the enemy. There's another 5% that are mixed in there that you have to deal with and dodge while you're trying to bounce your balls, but surprisingly, the game does a really good job of making the enemy projectiles stand out against yours. So it felt like I always at least had a good read of the situation and could contend with the threat that the game gave me. It was fun to try out these combinations of balls, but what really makes the game is that you're not just selecting these and then keeping them, you are leveling them up and then using them. Fusion and evolution are the backbone of this game. The fact that you only have so many equipable slots for your balls and your passive abilities, but that eventually you can level these up to the point where you can fuse 2 of them together. And there's regular fusion, which basically just combines the effects into one thing. But then there's evolution, which drastically changes the ball into something even greater than the sum of the parts would have been. But the best part about that is that then you go from occupying 2 slots down to 1 slot, which gives you room for more balls, which you can fuse and evolve. Heck, you could evolve 2 balls, evolve another 2 balls, and then fuse the evolutions of those balls if you've got the resources for it. There's only so much time in the run, and you need to collect gems Vampire Survivors style in order to make these level ups happen. And then you need to find the little rifty thingies on the field to perform a fusion or a fission, which is a nice little backup option in case a fusion isn't viable at that time. It'll level up the balls to get them closer to fusion and evolution. So it's all really well thought out. And then on top of that, and I do literally mean on top of the ball pit, lies Balbalon, the city that was destroyed, that you are trying to rebuild by going to the depths. And this is where the extra bits of progression come in. Something that I and many others really like about Hades is that as you are doing these runs, you're also getting permanent progression upgrades. So you're feeling like you're making real progress even every time you fail. That same logic applies here in Ball Pit, because as you build out the town, you are building facilities that give you permanent passive upgrades, like boosting your attack or boosting your speed. And you do have to manage your town in order to get these upgrades. You have to actually farm stuff from fields and forests that you put down. You fire off all your characters like the balls in the pit and watch them pinball around the place to collect the resources and upgrade the facilities. It's not just the visual of everything bouncing around that's good. It's also the inherent sound design that comes with the balls impacting different enemies and the walls and your characters, including the upper field area of Balbalon. There's this really satisfying clink sound when things bounce off. So, in total, Ball Pit is winning the bronze medal for sound design and the gold medal for best progression. A big surprise for me this year was a little puzzle game called Is This Seat Taken? Its premise is simple, but it's so effective at what it does. There are different people looking for places to sit, but people are picky. They might not want to be around certain other people, or they might want a window seat, or they might want food right next to them at the table in the restaurant. You might be at a movie theater and they don't want the person with the large hat blocking their view of the movie. All sorts of factors at play. But it's set up like your standard logic puzzle. When you highlight a person as you look for them to get a seat, it'll tell you exactly what they're looking for, what conditions need to be met, and if you place them properly, it'll do a little strike through on their list, and they'll have a nice happy face as they sit in their seat. This game hinges entirely on its user experience. Everything is communicated clearly and effectively to great degree, where you don't even need to read everything on the screen to understand what's going on. If I put large hat person in front of another person at the movie theater and the person behind them changes from a smile to a frown, I know that I just messed something up. And everything that the people could be reacting to as far as other people go is communicated in the simple but elegant designs of the characters. If one character hasn't showered, you're gonna be able to see that pretty clearly. If another one is wearing cologne, it has a different form of smell line emanating off it. There are certain school levels where someone likes to copy off of another person, and those people are always holding pencils. And another person just wants to focus on reading, and they're holding their book. Or you've got a tourist on a vacation, they want a window seat, and they've got a camera because they want to take pictures from the side of the boat. Kids have this blush effect on them, whereas adults don't. So it's very easy to read the situation and learn what you need to learn in order to solve the puzzle effectively. It's a short game, But surprisingly, it also has a narrative through line. You end up following this character recurringly as they're on a journey to try and fulfill their dreams. It's a simple but effective story that takes us from place to place so that we get to experience different types of seating environments like trains or restaurants or movie theaters. But it doesn't like bog down the whole experience. You're not following the same person the entire time. It's just that when they go to Barcelona, you do a series of puzzles in Barcelona. I got a surprising amount of value out of this game. I brought it into the classroom at one point. It's educational in the way that it naturally and intuitively gets people thinking about problem solving. It was a great tool for some of my students to experience because it showed them about logic and narrowing down the options based on the most prevalent needs in that situation. And so I'm hoping that's something they take with them moving forward. And it's a game that I could see myself coming back to just to keep showing people. At this point, I probably already know the puzzle solutions, and I don't know that I would replay the game for myself. But it's left a decently lasting impact on me this year for that value that it was able to instate. With all that in mind, Is This Seat Taken is receiving the silver medal for puzzle design and user experience. Dear Me, I Was is arguably not a game. But then again, I guess you could say that about any visual novel. But there's really not many gameplay elements at hand in Dear Me, I Was. There's moments where you select food to eat it, or where you might trace over a paper to reveal the next scene. But apart from those little things, you are mostly engaging with this media to watch the story unfold and to see it unfold in an immaculate art style that combines watercolor with rotoscoping. We've seen hints of this art style from Another Code Recollection prior, but it's been put to full use in this brand new, original, very short and succinct game. But the reason it's this high up on my list is because of those visuals combined with the story being told. Despite how short it is, it can leave a lasting impact. I was very surprised by the direction that the story took at the end, and I would absolutely not spoil that here when you could probably see it for yourself in under an hour. That does hold this game back from the top 10, but you follow one woman's story. Many life events happen, and they are portrayed in the game's signature art style, accompanied by a lovely piano soundtrack, where a lot of the tracks do start to blend together. You can hardly even tell that there are different songs in the soundtrack, but I do think that's by design, intentional, and good, because this is one continuous story that keeps flowing as like the passage of time. So too do the songs flow from one to another fairly naturally. You might get little breaks in the music between chapters, but otherwise, it's just gonna set a subtle tone. It still didn't crack my top 3 soundtracks of the year, I'm sorry to say, despite all the praise I'm giving it here, but it's one of the key elements of the experience, alongside the pictures and the animation and just the narrative through line. This is also another wordless narrative. Nothing is spoken, nothing is written out. You see what's happening, you see reactions on people's faces being so eloquently drawn. And so to a certain degree, there is some interpretation up in this narrative, depending on how you're seeing everything. But I think by the end, especially what is shown at the end, is something beautiful and undeniable. I think the game makes its point very clearly. It is unfortunately something that I would have to go into spoiler territory to give you the full reasoning of why I'm feeling the way that I feel about it, what that ending twist does. So all I can really do at this stage is encourage you to try it for yourself if you've got the means. It's currently on Switch 2, and it's a relatively cheap title because it's a relatively short title, despite those elements working against it. Dear Me I Was receives the bronze medal for narrative and the gold medal in art direction. Starting out the top 10 games of the year is what people are going to consider an interesting choice. But Keita Takahashi, of former Katamari fame, went on to make 2 a T this year. 2 a T is not as short as Dear Me I Was, but not as long as something like an RPG. Yeah, it hits this little middle ground in between. The story is told in episodes, evoking the idea of an anime with several episodes that play out, but this is not an episodic game. You buy the whole thing and you get all the episodes. It is a comedic allegory for living with disability. You see, you play the role of a teenager who was born in T-pose and is stuck that way, but has to navigate daily life anyway. And you know, that they seem pretty positive despite the disability. The fact that, you know, they can't move their arms in the same way that other people can. But they have their own ways of doing things and they still find joy in life, and you go through that with them at the beginning of the game. And then some weird stuff happens because this is the person from Katamari. It's very cartoony. Despite being a game inherently about disability, it's not a sob story. It's not a pity fest. It is something that we bask in. It's a joy. Like, everyone out there is different. Everyone has their own ways of doing things. And what's happening in this story is not harming the person with the disability. It's just, this is their quirky life, full of quirky little going-ons and happenings, and eventually mysteries about why they even are the way they are in the first place. This is also a game where you shift between viewpoints at different moments in the story, and I think it's good for changing up the gameplay. Another thing that changes up the gameplay is that instead of just wandering around town all the time, you've got mini games which are headed by the giraffe character, the best character. You see, they just like to make food. There's actually multiple giraffes. I think there's like 4. Anyway, the giraffes will serve food, and there's a minigame related to each one, and it plays on the awkward controls that come with moving your T-pose body. I will say I was surprised at how few the accessibility options were in the game about disability. There's a toggle where instead of spinning the stick to do something, you can press a button, and that was the entire accessibility menu. So that's a little surprising, but the game isn't complicated in its controls. Otherwise, you are largely wandering around town using the stick to move and a button to jump. So I guess there's not that much that you can do. Anyway, the cast of characters is what truly makes this game. The story being told, they actually use, for all my theater buffs out there, a Greek chorus. There's just these 3 random students who are narrating the events the way that a Greek chorus would. They're completely like zoomed out from the situation and making comments kind of directly to the camera. You also have a pet dog. Should mention the pet dog is among the best characters in the game, full of best characters like the giraffe. And your mom is another really good character who takes an active role in the story. For sure, that's nice to see from a parent in fiction. Besides quirky for all the cartoony events that happens, the best way I can describe this game is quaint. You're doing your daily life around town, navigating despite your T-pose disability. You can customize your character with different outfits, and sometimes it's just a nice, chill thing. There's a point where you can ride the train, and then you can choose to skip the train animation, or you can just watch as the train does a lap around the island. So like, the game knows that sometimes you're just sitting there vibing to it, but if you want real gameplay, it's in the mini games, and like, you're gonna get the most out of this game if you're a score chaser, going for all the achievements by maxing out how well you do on those mini games. It's doable. I managed to do it myself, but also completely optional if you just want to see the story and be done with it. To a T, for all the zany events and all the high-speed stuff that plays out just like an actual cartoon would, is getting this silver medal for animation. All right, I'm going to propose a game to you now that just so happens to match the one in my number 9 spot. You know how Bug Fables took the Paper Mario formula and really expanded on it, matured it in certain ways, made things just a bit more challenging, but added a certain level of polish that only a passionate indie developer would really go the extra mile to do? Cool. We're going to take that idea, but instead of changing Paper Mario, we're going to change Donkey Kong Country, the classic trilogy. Windswept is a game that came out this year and features a duck and a turtle on a 2D platforming adventure. It is extremely reminiscent of the Donkey Kong Country games. You've got your myriad collectibles in each stage, your secret bonus zones with extra challenges to complete to get full 100% completion, the overworld map, the exclamation point on the level title when you find everything that a level has to offer. But it takes that premise and it goes so much further. For one thing, there is some advanced tech in this game, and it is all diegetically tied to the fact that you are a duck and a turtle, which is really something I gotta give praise for. The designs are simple, but they are elegant in their pixel graphics, and they are completely justified with the gameplay. Like, DK and Diddy, they're monkeys. It's like, are monkeys known for rolling around? Is that a thing that happens? It doesn't feel natural to me. And then Diddy's got a jetpack. Okay, monkeys don't normally have jetpacks, but we'll roll with it. It's a video game, and it just looks cool. Now, when you're playing as Marbles the Duck, you have a glide ability because you're flapping your wings, and you can see that happening. You can pick up your turtle companion Checkers, toss them, and then bounce on their shell Mario style because it's a shell and it's pulling from the trope of the Mario Koopa shell. And then, speaking of which, both characters can swim. Ducks and turtles can swim, so the underwater levels make complete sense in that regard. And then, okay, maybe a little less realistic is the fact that Checkers has a mid-air dash that he can jump out of, but he hides himself in his turtle shell and spins around. So, okay, maybe not 100% true to real life, but there was an effort there. And I wouldn't trade the turtle for the world. Checkers is adorable, and I love him, and I wish I was a better protector, because some of these levels get hard, and I'm not even talking about the optional challenge levels. There are optional challenge levels, and I can definitely see myself grinding those out at some point. I did one on stream. It took a good while, but it really tests you on the game's more intricate traversal mechanics. Some of these partner moves that you have to pull off in succession and chain together. It's a whole thing. And then once you've learned those tricks, you can apply them to some of the regular levels and find some shortcuts or some secrets that you might have missed before you knew about them. Like, I'm at a point now where I'm really pulling off advanced tech kind of regularly. It's not changing the fact that some of the levels are still really hard, because for like one, I recently hit an auto scroller section of the game, and no amount of advanced tech is going to make the screen scroll faster. I still have to dodge everything coming at me. And then there's always the element of like, you pretty much got to be spot on with your jumps. If you're off by a hair, you're gonna take the hit, possibly plunge into an abyss or lava or some other no good hazard. But the game has been an absolute joy to play. It is absolutely the best 2D platformer that I've encountered this year. Might be the only one? Question mark. Windswept is getting the silver medal in traversal and the silver medal in character design. There's a certain level of irony to the fact that I'm putting Blueprints at number 8. But that irony will be lost on you if you have not played the game for yourself. And I dare not spoil a single thing about this game. It is the kind that is best to go in completely blind on. It's an escape room type experience, but run-based. I'm not going to call it roguelike. I'm going to say that it's run-based with the select one of 3 perks style game that we've been seeing a lot of lately. But people trying to inject that into other genres, sometimes to mixed results. Sometimes you get a Balatro, but other times you get a ball pit, and then still a third time you get Blueprints. And like Blueprints is one that should be right up my alley as an avid puzzle enjoyer. So taking that first person escape room puzzle game and giving it that run-based flavor, it's like, how do you even do that? But they found a way, because the entire house is an architectural mystery and you are building it out room by room. So each run you're getting different rooms to explore. And the best way to progress in this game is just to take a random chance on something you haven't seen before. Like, you know, hallways are nice, but maybe once in a while, if you get the veranda, then there might be something worth exploring in there. I don't think there's an actual veranda. I'm just making that up as an example. There is a narrative happening, but it's completely in the background, and the amount that you get out of it is totally the amount that you invest in the game altogether. There are secrets everywhere. There are so many clues that out of context don't even seem like clues, but then later you find a different room that actually explains what you're looking at in some offhanded way, and then you're like, oh my god, I need to go back through every room and reevaluate my whole life. And that is how this game can get its hooks in you and lead to like a total obsession. When I wasn't playing this game on stream, I was playing this game off stream by not playing the game, but like going back through my screenshots and taking notes. My Google Doc for this game is enormous with the way I was keeping notes, but I ended up having to keep notes in a certain way to keep everything straight. So like at one point I went from handwritten notes to just reformatting it all together in a way that made more sense. I'd be like zooming into things in screenshots and thinking, what does that mean? Or how do I decode this message if it even needs to be decoded? And then every so often you will stumble upon a puzzle solution and it will give you some sort of lore revelation, and you will be like, where is this going? Even when you, technically speaking, finish the game and beat a run, it's got that Hades effect where if you want the full story, then you kind of need to keep going post-game in order to find every secret possible. It is a special type of game that gets you thinking like a conspiracy theorist. And it's the kind of thing that you'll only get one first time with, so enjoy it while you've got it. Blueprints takes the gold medal in puzzle design. There were 2 ninja games that released this year, and I talked about Shinobi earlier, but my preferred brand of ninja ended up being Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. This game harkens back to the original Ninja Gaiden era games, but it has that same modern polish that we've been seeing from beat-em-ups like TMNT Shredder's Revenge, for example. Now, this one is not a beat-em-up in quite the same way. It's got the 2D platforming elements, and yeah, I would call it a little more action-based. Here's what I liked about it. Number one, the game has you moving in a constant flow state in a way that I wish I was in that kind of flow state with Windswept, but that one is so tricky that I never really get there. It's designed around its mechanics in a way where you can easily see how you're supposed to chain from one thing into the next, into the third. It's not always easy to pull that off, but okay, one mechanic you have is your rage. And after beating an enemy with a certain glowing aura to them, you get an extra special rage attack, which can one-hit just about anything on the screen, including some really tough buff enemies. So maybe you're running along, one of those glowing enemy comes along, and then you keep running to the right, and then you see the muscly guy that you're supposed to slash with your newly rage-fueled attack. And then you're about to make a jump, and there's an enemy in the air, and that's when you get into your next mechanic, which is the bounce. I love the bounce. It is an attack that you perform, like if you press a button in the air, shortly before hitting the enemy, you will start doing a spin, and you will land on that enemy, bounce off them, and damage them. Usually enough to kill them if they're mid-air enemies, but for regular enemies, it might take a couple of those bounces chained together. So imagine having the power bounce from Paper Mario, but in a Ninja Gaiden game is really fun, especially when you just move from one enemy to the next, or when you're in a boss battle and they stand still for a couple seconds and you're like bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce, and then they start doing their next attack pattern, but you're just like bounce, 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 bounce as they're running along the bottom of the screen, and you're like, nothing can stop me, except, trust me, stuff can stop you. This game can get hard at times, but I don't mind it. This game is absolutely beat your head against a wall kind of hard, where you need to fight things over and over again to get it right. But here's the thing about that. They have checkpoints, and they're in the right places. I think it was the third level where I had a super tough time against a boss. Or maybe like the first level of the third area. Not sure if I'm describing this accurately. But there's one boss. It took me multiple dozens of tries before I beat it. But I was fine because there was a checkpoint right before the boss. The game was encouraging me to get straight back in there and try it again. No giant run back, thank you, Hollow Knight. And it felt good when I finally beat him afterwards. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there. And then some bosses I had a surprisingly easy time with, but there were a few more where definitely took some learning, some adapting, some fine-tuning of which moves I was using at what time. And I didn't even mention the fact that you have a second ninja on this journey in the form of Kumori, and that she's got her own distinct abilities from Kenji, who is the main character you're controlling. There are dedicated sections where you use her and you're in a time limit to reach a certain collectible item or hit a switch so that Kenji can advance. Honestly, it's just really good, really refined action gameplay with a solid soundtrack to boot. Some rockin' tunes in there. And the whole thing just looks great. It's very visceral. Like, if you're not into blood, maybe give this one a skip, but the blood is done well, as that's kind of has that Demon Slayer effect. That show somehow makes gore gorgeous, and I can say the same about Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. Ultimately, I am giving Ninja Gaiden Ragebound the bronze medal for best combat. I suck at Crypt of the Necrodancer. The original Necrodancer experience, the thing that people flocked to because it was a dungeon crawler where you move on the rhythm and all the enemies move on the rhythm and you're supposed to be able to fight things off and react accordingly. It had like 4 zones and it was randomly generated each time, so you had to constantly adapt. But I was terrible at it. And it's not because I don't have rhythm. I think that I've done enough on this channel to show that I'm pretty rhythmically inclined. That's why I at least tried the game in the first place. But the movement on that grid around this dark place where I could barely tell what the enemies were doing, it just didn't quite mesh with me. And then somehow I ended up giving the series another chance when they crossed over with Nintendo for Cadence of Hyrule. And that game I love. I've done multiple runs of that one, and I think the difference is the persistent overworld with the constant progression. You get those random Necrodancer elements in dungeons, but on the overworld things are persistent and you're getting permanent upgrades and inventory items. So I think that little bit of a break where like if I died I at least came back with something, I think that's what set it apart for me. I ended up really taking to Cadence of Hyrule. All this to say, Rift of the Necrodancer removes the dungeon crawling element and says, let's just turn Necrodancer into a pure, unfiltered rhythm game. And it was great. Honestly, what makes this game work so well is the visual communication that is happening as enemies move down the Guitar Hero style lanes that are tied to your left, up, and right arrow key. You can see them coming, you can see what color they are, you can see which way they're facing, and all of that quickly communicates to you exactly what you need to do. Green, just press the thing once. Blue, press the thing twice. If it's blue and it's facing left, then you need to hit the key it's on and then the key to the left of that on the second beat. If something's happening on an offbeat, there's a different shadow symbol underneath the enemy, so that even before it comes, you know, okay, there's going to be an offbeat thing, so it's going to go like but instead of but. Like it's all very intuitive and easy to posit out. So that same complaint I had about Unbeatable earlier, where I was using left and right to control up and down, I don't have that problem with the PC version of Crypt of the Necrodancer, because left is left, middle is up arrow, and right is right arrow, and that matches how it's laid out on the keyboard. I would personally recommend playing the Steam version if you're able, not just because of that, but also the access to the editor and the things that people have made in the editor, giving you so much more content available. I played a Rhythm Heaven remix in there, and it worked out very nicely. It was so fun to see how people made that work. Yeah, I don't think face buttons give you quite the same feel as arrow keys, so that's my recommendation, but it is also available on consoles if you really want to give it a try that way. Solid soundtrack, lots of fun guitar things happening with some electro swing mixed in at stages. There is a light comedic story happening as you go from stage to stage in story mode. It didn't really matter all that much to me, and it was really just some justification for some Rhythm Heaven style minigames, of which there are not that many. I think if you're looking for that, then you need to play Bits and Bops instead, which is a very recent release that I did not get to, so did not mention prior on this list. But for the core Necrodancer Guitar Hero gameplay, I would say the game is still very much worth it. And just being the rhythm junkie that I am, it's placed very high on the list here. But like I said, for all that visual communication that the game does, I am giving it the bronze medal in user experience. And now, before I talk about them in depth, I would like to present to you my top 5 games of the year in no particular order with this piano medley. 2025 was a banner year for people like myself with GameCube nostalgia. We got Pac-Man World 2 Repack earlier on this list, and now we have Kirby Air Riders. After all this time, anyone who grew up with the original knows exactly how much fun it was to just dive into the city over and over again, to occasionally throw in a recent Air Ride or Top Ride, but to really dominate with City Trial. Sakurai has put painstaking detail into every aspect of Kirby Air Riders, from the interface down to the amount of options available for each mode. If there is a way that you want to play this game in multiplayer, it's doable. You want an air ride where you have F-Zero style eliminations from taking too much damage, you can do that. You want to race 99 laps on a course and marathon the thing, you can do that. Want to join people in a paddock and spectate matches when you're not actually in one? You can do that. And in speaking of the paddock, something absolutely brilliant about it is the fact that there are these terminals where anyone in the paddock can set up a match, and there can be multiple going on at the same time. So if one person wants to start up City Trial, but another person is just in the mood for a quick top ride, they can do that. Again, if there's a way you want to play this game, it's there. The immense number of customization options for cosmetics on your riders and your machines. My God, the things that people have done with the machines is astounding. And of course, the heart of the Kirby Air Ride experience is the checklist. This is especially what keeps people like me playing the game for single player stuff, and it's what's going to keep me coming back to this game well after 2025 is over. You go into that checklist and it's essentially a list of 750 achievements, but in typical Sakurai fashion, when you complete one, the way that you complete another one adjacent on the board is revealed to you. And so that just gives you the incentive to keep trying random things and then get into the more specific details of some of the objectives. And an extra quality of life feature for this game: you can press the plus button while hovering over an uncompleted objective on the checklist, and the game will configure exactly what you need. So if it says beat a level 8 CPU on this particular race course, you press the plus button and you are loaded into that race course with a level 8 CPU ready to go. You just pick your machine and rider and have at it. The online is also really well implemented. I've only had one connection error in my time with the game so far, but you know they're taking it seriously because there's an in-game menu to check your connection and how strong it is according to the game. This is clearly a labor of love for a simple game that has, had its time, certainly, but is welcome back in full force. If you haven't played Kirby Air Riders, it's not going to be for everyone. I hope people got a chance to play that online demo, or that they come out with another one, because it can be pretty hard to tell just from looking at it if it's going to click with you the way it does with so many others. And the best experience you can have in the game is with other people online. But hey, if I can try and sell you on it, it's a racer where you're moving forward automatically, and you have one button to control your boosting and your braking simultaneously. That's the risk and reward of Kirby Air Ride, is that when you push the one button that is dedicated to braking, you are also charging up a boost. So you might need to slow down a little bit to get a big burst of speed later. It's helpful for navigating turns with a decent amount of speed, because then you just charge forward after drifting. Same thing with trying to suck up enemies using the exact same button. They did add one new button to this game for your special, which can be a little bit of a comeback mechanic for people, as can the new star trail that's been added, where if you follow behind a racer's path, you have a better chance of catching up with them because you're picking up energy from their machine. It's a brilliant way to keep things fresh in the game. You got to stay on your toes, change up your pathing, but you always have a chance to come back, whether it's through the special or gliding with your machines that are better at gliding and then making a perfect landing to get a speed boost, or maybe just hitting that drift in exactly the right way. And I almost forgot to mention the environments in this game. If you look at some of these courses, they are downright gorgeous. One of the best showpieces for the Switch 2, maybe slightly behind Metroid Prime 4 in that department. But some courses are so dynamic, and They're able to be so because they are these quick, bite-sized pieces, but just looking at them in motion, it is a sight to behold. So with all that said, Kirby Air Riders will receive the silver medal for environment design and the gold medals for user experience and best multiplayer. I never finished the first Hades game, but something about Hades 2 was calling to me, and I'm glad that it did because it was an immensely enjoyable game. Hades 2 retains the same features that made Hades 1 so enjoyable, which is that you are going to do a run through gauntlet upon gauntlet of enemies and bosses using various types of weapons and abilities, but you're likely going to fail. Even if you don't fail, there's reasons why you would want to do another run even after a successful run. But after each successful run, there's two major things that happen. That is that you get permanent progression, you'll be able to craft new items or unlock new abilities. In this game, they use an Arcana system for that, as well as the keepsakes that you had in Hades 1 and a Witch's Cauldron for more specific things. So then you're ready to go into the next run, even stronger than before, but the extra flavor on top is that there is pretty much always new dialogue waiting for you when you return from a run. Characters will comment on specific happenings of that run or how much further you got that time than the last time. They'll talk about characters that you meet along the way. You'll learn more about their relationships. So even when you fail, you are making story progress in the sense that you are always learning something new. At one point, one of the characters even gave me advice for how to beat a certain boss, and that was useful information. I kind of wish that happened a little more often, but even without that, the flavor text is one of the key pillars of this game. Some say that the narrative has taken a backseat from Hades 1, but I think the dialogue still shines through. I wouldn't be the best judge of the narrative anyway, since I didn't actually finish Hades 1, and so I would like to make note, you don't need to finish Hades 1 to understand what is special about this game. I'm sure I'm missing some callbacks to Hades 1, definitely, but I wouldn't let that stop you. One change from Hades that I really appreciate is the cast. You still have your normal attack, your special, and your cast, and you chain them together to do different things. You collect randomized boons from the gods and goddesses along the way that will power them up, and you plan your strategy around that as you build out your arsenal. But the cast in Hades 2 is a binding circle instead of a projectile, and this made things feel manageable that otherwise would not have. Just the fact that if an enemy was chasing me down, I could suddenly bind them in place, keep running a little further to keep my distance, and then knock them out with my weapon. And then the fact that that binding circle would also receive boons that could damage the enemy or have other status effects on them. I think it was a great change up to the Hades formula. I think my favorite weapon was one that utilized a bunch of projectiles, mostly because I would get a Daedalus Hammer upgrade that would increase the ammunition and the refill speed, and man, it felt good to pummel foes from a distance. But everyone will have their favorites because all five are very distinct from each other. The game is well optimized with frame rate in mind, and Darren Korb returns with another really good soundtrack that just barely missed out on my top soundtracks of the year, but is still an impressive sight nonetheless. The vocal themes in this game especially stand out, so I do want to give props for that. There's also a myriad number of guest musicians, like a Spanish guitarist or a flautist, and Darren has managed to wrangle up a whole lot of talented individuals. So again, really impressed at the musical output of Hades 2, which lends to the whole package. Combat feels the best it's ever been, in my opinion. And when you tie that together with everything else, it had to be in my top 5 games of the year. I'm giving Hades 2 the bronze medal in character design for how they changed up some of the gods and goddesses, especially Dionysus, if you know what I mean. The silver medals for combat, voice performance, and progression. And lastly, the gold medal for dialogue. I was talking to some people about Wanderstop, which is a game that I knew I was going to like from the minute that I heard about this new studio, Ivy Road. comprised of talent from many other games that I've enjoyed. You've got writers from the Stanley Parable and BioShock 2, and you've got the composer from Minecraft. And plenty more talented individuals alongside, but those were the three I heard about first. But anyway, I was talking about Wanderstop with some people that I know, and at one point it struck me to say, Wanderstop isn't supposed to be fun. You know, no shade if you have fun with the game, and I guess you have to argue that I did if I'm putting it at the number 3 spot, but I think its impact is so much more than that. Wanderstop sees you playing the role of a warrior named Alta, and she needs to take a stint from warrioring and ends up at the Wanderstop, where she's advised, hey, maybe just run this tea shop for a while. And this is what I'm saying. The game isn't exactly about fun, it's about doing the work. Upkeeping the grounds, making tea for customers, doing things the way that you see fit when you're running the tea shop, getting to know people. It's all work. But it's the necessary work. It's the emotional work. It was kind of the impetus for the entire game, according to what I've heard from the creators. Wanderstop is another case of a game where what you get out of it is going to be directly tied to what you put into it. And it's not going to feel like a lot of other games. There will come points in the overall narrative, at least for me, they made me question my gaming sensibilities as a whole. Why do I do the things that I do in other games? Why am I doing them here? Should I be doing them here? Should I be doing them there? Many aspects of gaming kind of get flipped on their head with this one, so I just wouldn't treat it as a game. And I don't mean this in the same way as Dear Me I Was, where it's really more of a short story that you watch unfold. You're still living the Wanderstop experience. You're still putting all yourself into it. But I have to call it more than a game. You interact with a controller and press buttons and complete objectives the way you would in a game. You customize the area the way you could in a game. But the mission is to do the work, to really think about who you are as a person and why we might act the way we act. To get to see different points of view from the other in-game characters and gain new perspective as a result. It's a game where I don't want to spoil too much in the way of the narrative. I mean, mechanically speaking, it's like I said, you are upkeeping the grounds of a tea shop, so there is gardening, foraging for ingredients, actually making the tea, cleaning up after people, all the stuff you would expect if you were working a real job at a tea shop, although a little more fantastical in how the tea is made and how the ingredients are grown. There's magic at play here, and that magic comes with both the art direction that gives you this wonderful locale. It's a locale that you can't leave, and narratively speaking, you are kind of trapped there. So it's weird to me that I don't feel as trapped there as I do in Lumio City in Pokemon Legends ZA, which also attempts to have the one location narrative. But I guess it's because it's not about the location. And even then, the location changes over time, but it's because you as a person and the character of Alta are changing over time. But at least the place you're trapped is gorgeous and is filled with gorgeous music from C418. This is one of my top soundtracks of the year because every single track just seems to hit the right way. It is more subdued in some places, but it also changes things up, and there's an in-tea shop radio with so many different songs that you could potentially pick out for doing your tasks. And they've all got these different flavors, just like the people and the tea that are in the shop. So if I haven't gotten it across by rambling as much as I have, I hope I'm making it clear. I put this game at number 3 for a reason. It is another shorter game. It's one that I finished in a weekend, but the only reason I finished it in a weekend is because it was an experience that I couldn't put down until it was over. It was hard to end it. But at some point, other opportunities come up. And if I ever want to, it's there waiting for me. But in the meantime, I've done the work. And the people behind this game have done the work. Wanderstop wins the bronze medal for best soundtrack and the silver medal for narrative and dialogue. It frustrates me how good Donkey Kong Bonanza is. There is one major problem that I have with the game, and despite it feeling like a major problem, something that goes against the direct design philosophy of the game, something as big as that did not keep it from being the second best game on this list. So let's just get that part over with. This game gives you a number of different abilities, and it tells you, go wherever you want. If you are big Hulkin' Donkey Kong, if you want to smash through that rock over there, if you want to dig a tunnel through the ground, there's nothing stopping you from doing that for the most part. In fact, the game will even reward you in some ways for doing that, because you'll scrounge up gold and treasure chests with maps that point to objectives. You might even just stumble upon an objective. And as you collect gold, you're also fueling your transformation abilities, your bonanzas. If you look at the speedrunning scene, it's no secret that these transformations are absolutely busted, and the in-game economy makes it so easy to rack as many of these as you want in a matter of seconds. And that's my issue with the game, because there is so many good mechanics that are lying underneath all that some people will never see because they just like to see the game break. And I shouldn't be mad about that, because that's a personal decision. If people want to play the game that way, I should be happy that the game is allowing them to play it that way, and that they get their own sense of joy from the game. But something about it just rubs me the wrong way when I see this section that I struggled on, that I had to engage with an interesting mechanic in order to overcome, and then someone else just takes the ostrich bonanza and flies over the whole thing with aplomb. It's like, ha, I didn't have to do any of that. Like, why are we playing the game at that point? Why did we make the game this way at that point? It's a question that I will be struggling with probably the rest of my life, and it shouldn't matter, and it doesn't. So let's get on to the good stuff. Because when I did engage with this game, and when I met it at what I felt was its intended level, usually ground level, then I saw so many interesting new platforming mechanics on display. The marketing for this game is all about go anywhere, punch through whatever you want, just break things. They want you to have that kind of fun. But what the marketing is not telling you is that each layer of Donkey Kong Bonanza manages to put some new twist on interacting with the terrain. They might introduce a new type of terrain that is only possible in video games, like one that lets you float up really high. Or they might make it so that breaking one terrain is actually how you create terrain in a corresponding location. And that's just a couple of the mind-blowing mechanics that I saw. Some of the super late game stuff absolutely had me floored, thinking, how did they get this to run, and how did they think of this idea in the first place? But it all stems back from terrain. That is the name of the game. Because you're breaking terrain, and if you control yourself, if you meet the game where it's at, then there are some interesting challenges that come as a result of how do I break this terrain properly to achieve the objective, or how do I get from point A to point B when it just looks impossible? It was all so much fun to traverse. And as you're traversing, you have a sonar function. So if you just clap Donkey Kong's hands every once in a while you're digging around, then you're gonna stumble upon hidden collectibles or even entire Bonandium Gem objectives. And then that feeds into itself, because then you use those to fill out your skill tree and unlock new abilities that will allow you to find new Bonandium Gems. So ultimately, this did turn into a game that I felt like I had to 100%. I got every Bonandium Gem, because it was fun to keep traversing the terrain with their interesting mechanics, and to keep exploring it to find all the hidden goodies around. There were maybe some bananas that felt very arbitrary, like, oh, I dug a hole in the ground here and I got a banana, whoop-de-doo. but with so many in the game, it's easy to overlook those. There's a fun new cast of villains, and Pauline plays an interesting role in the whole thing. The characters are very expressive, especially Donkey Kong himself. You can tell they clearly put a lot of work into getting the faces down right. So yes, I would say that Bonanza, way more than Mario Kart World, is the reason to pick up a Switch 2. Although now we also have Kirby Air Riders, so yeah, take your pick at this point. So, my personal grievances with how other people played this game aside, I still have to acknowledge that it is one of the best platformers in its class. Donkey Kong Bonanza, as such, earns the gold medal for traversal and exploration. When you saw the title and thumbnail of this video, you knew exactly how it was going to end, and that's precisely why I wanted to pick 32 other games to talk about, to really show how expansive of a year this was and how there's something for everyone out there this year. It was really an incredible year to play video games, but there was one name that may have dominated the scene, and I just want to set the record straight on one thing. You might think it's a mistake, you might think it's overhyped, but Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is undoubtedly the best game of the year. It would be easy to look at Clair Obscur Expedition 33 the wrong way. What I've seen some people take away from this game is that it does what many classic JRPGs have been doing for years, but that it's Western animated and Western made, and it's got that Western look to it, and so now suddenly people like it. The thing about that is that there's one big misconception there, and it's that Clair Obscur doesn't add anything of its own to make it stand out from its classic predecessors. Yes, many of the things in the game are directly borrowed from classic predecessors. The creators of the game has said as much. For one thing, the traversable world map. That was a direct callback to classic RPGs that have world maps connecting the areas, and they just felt like doing that, and so they did. There's even certain areas that kind of feel like N64 era, where you're looking at a static image and you're moving in that area just to collect a quick little item, and then you're on your way out. But there's more to it. In combat, you have your typical turn-based combat, much in the same way that games like Persona 5 have each action mapped to a face button or a D-pad direction so that you can quickly select stuff without sorting through a classic Dragon Quest style menu. Clair Obscur does the same thing here. Much like games like Paper Mario have had action commands where you need to time button presses during your attacks to successfully complete the attack or to do extra damage, Clair Obscur does that. But again, there's more to it. It's the fact that all these things that people like about turn-based RPGs of the modern era are being combined with new and original things. For one, there's actually a sort of Souls-like element to the combat where you really need to learn enemy animations and attack patterns and be ready to time things. So the game gives you two means by which to evade damage. One is your dodge. If you use the dodge button, the game will give you more leniency on dodging the attack, and you can avoid damage that way. However, there's also the parry button on the right bumper. And if you choose to parry the attack, you need to perfectly nail every input, or at least much closer to perfect than you do with dodge. But if you do, then your team will counterattack, and that can do massive damage depending on your build. So it's a risk and reward. You might take damage because your parry timing is stricter, but if you don't, then you're going to do your counterattack damage, and that's going to be doubly effective. It's kind of like how Thousand Year Door had the regular guard and the super guard, which would deal back a bit of damage to the enemy. Just like the Mario and Luigi series, these animations do a really good job at conveying what the attack is going to be like. Some of them you might need to see once or twice to really get down, but there is so much put into the timing of the wind-up and the release of these attacks that sometimes you just intuit exactly when you need to press the button. And if you're unsure, then you learn by using the dodge button and then move on to trying to parry. When combat really comes into its own, though, if this hasn't sold you on it yet, the number one thing about the Clair Obscur combat is also tied in with its progression. As you defeat enemies or explore the overworld, you might run into these things called Pictos. Each character can equip 3, and each Picto comes with a stat bonus like extra HP or extra speed, as well as a secondary effect like extra damage on free aim shots. If you use a Picto enough times in battle, you will get another version of it called a Lumina. The Lumina does not have the stat bonuses, but does have the secondary effect, and these can be equipped by any and every character, as long as they've got Lumina points, which you build up over time. And so the real fun of the combat in this game comes from deciding which Pictos you want to equip and which Luminas you want to equip. It gets to the point where there's probably at least 100 different Luminas you can pick from, and you have that times the number of characters in the game. You can switch them on and off freely from the menu. So there's all sorts of different builds you can do. In one example, you might give your character a status ailment, but that status ailment happens to power up your character times infinity. In another example, you might build someone out to do a ton of burn damage, and then other characters have abilities that play off the burn to either heal or do extra damage. There's so many things in the game, and I'm sure there's some that I never even found in my playtime with the game, that each run of the game could be especially different. This is on top of having your typical skill tree, by the way. So between the skill tree and the Pictos and Luminas, you can build out your characters in so many different ways. At one point, I actually changed one of my characters from a healer type to someone who specialized in critical hits that did extra damage and then built up her supers. And I was able to do that because the game gave me the tools to experiment. They give you plenty of options for redoing things anytime you want. There is really not a huge punishment for it. And sure, a classic RPG with intricate combat that is customizable to such a high degree already sounds fun on its own, but the main draw of Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is its narrative. If you have played the Xenoblade Chronicles games like I have, you may be familiar with their approach to narrative, where you don't know it, but everything is foreshadowing. On a first run through the game, everything just hits like a major plot twist. But on a second or third run through the game, you might notice that things were being hinted at that you didn't even realize your first time through because you didn't have the full context from later in the game. It's really well crafted. There are many layers to it, and it is done spectacularly by the voice cast and the motion cast. First, the team had the motion capture artist render each character, and some of these motion capture artists have got to be the best in the business. There have been so many moments of subtlety in their body language that struck home with me and friends of mine. One particular friend of mine wants to give recognition for the eye capture in this game, because there's a specific moment where a look on a certain character's eyes perfectly matches the context for the scene based on real life experience. And I had a similar moment like that, but with fingers trembling. If you connect to any of the experiences of the characters in games, you're going to find something that was performed scarily perfect by the motion capture crew. So first I want to give them major props, but then their work was dubbed over by the voice cast, who also performs admirably. I think Ben Starr was robbed at the main game awards for his part in the game, but even then, the ensemble as a whole really does an outstanding job. Accompanying all of this is my favorite soundtrack of the year. It might not be the classics that Mario Kart World has, but it is something original, and it has a pretty comparable number of tracks despite being built from the ground up. Not only that, there is such variety in genre, and each one is done really well. There are jazz pieces that will get your toes tapping. There are stunning soft vocal performances like the main theme. And then there's just weird stuff too. There's moments of weirdness in this game, and they just play into that and have fun with it, because that's part of the game they wanted to make. They wanted to have their fun classic RPG off the wall moments, but they wanted it all to take place with this story in this world that they've built, where the layers go deep. You might be analyzing the dialogue in this game for years, looking at the little intricacies in the things people said and what was truly meant by those things, or how they parallel real-world inspirations in such a way that will tell you more about the character if you know about what they were inspired by. I could go on about Clair Obscur Expedition 33 for several hours, and in the past I have, with some friends of mine. But for the sake of this video, and for the sake of not telling you about every single moment in the game and spoiling the experience for you, I am just going to stop there. I highly recommend Clair Obscur Expedition 33. There is a reason why so many people have been praising it all year long. And now, for the final awards, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 receives the bronze medal for dialogue, accessibility options, and progression. It receives the silver medal in exploration, and it receives the gold medal in animation, combat, voice performance, narrative, and soundtrack. If you finished this marathon of a video, then thank you. And once again, if you liked what you saw here, please consider hitting the thumbs up or the subscribe button. As soon as I finish this next sentence, we will be going into the medal recap, where you can see across each category which games were in my top 3, and that'll conclude the video. Thanks for watching. Bye.